Hey there, tonight we're diving into the frosty world of Inuit hunters, where surviving the Arctic's icy grip requires more than just wearing a warm parka. What you're about to discover is how a seal's sneeze might just save your life. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now settle in, maybe turn on some white noise or grab your favorite blanket, and let's drift into tonight's story together. You're standing on a vast, frozen expanse, with the kind of cold that doesn't just nip but gnaws at your bones. Welcome to the Arctic, where the Inuit have been thriving for centuries in temperatures that drop to a bone-chilling -50°C. Yes, that's cold enough to make your teeth shiver just thinking about it. But if you're expecting some kind of mystical tale of isolation and exotic survival, hold onto your sealskin mittens, because the real story is far more practical and far more impressive. First off, let's set the record straight. The Inuit didn't just pop up one day in the Arctic, magically acclimated to the cold like some kind of snowbound superheroes. Nope, they're part of the Thule culture, migrating from Alaska to Canada and Greenland around 1000 CE. They covered some serious ground here. Folks, thousands of kilometers over icy terrain that would have most of us crying for a warm fireplace and a hot cocoa. Yet the Inuit didn't just survive, they thrived. This brings us to the first myth we need to bust. The Inuit weren't isolated hermits living at the edge of the world. They had extensive trade networks, exchanging tools, knowledge, and even stories with other indigenous groups. So, while it's tempting to romanticize them as lone wolves against the Arctic blizzard, the reality is that they were part of a larger, interconnected web of cultures. They weren't just surviving, they were innovating. Now, let's talk about the real rock stars of this icy saga, seal skins and bones. Before you roll your eyes, consider this. The Inuit were masters of utilizing every single part of the animal. Seal skins became waterproof parkas and boots, which, let's face it, are the Arctic equivalent of a Gore-Tex jacket and Ugg boots. Bones turned into everything from sleds to needles. If there was a Nobel Prize for resourcefulness, the Inuit would have swept the awards. And let's not forget the igloos. Yes, those charming snow domes you've seen in cartoons. But these weren't just snow forts for the fun of it. Made entirely of snow blocks, they could be constructed in about an hour by skilled hands. Inside, the temperature could rise to a cozy 0°C, which sounds downright tropical compared to the outside world. The Inuit understood insulation long before your attic ever saw a fiberglass bat. What's fascinating is this wasn't just survival. It was adaptation at its finest. They had to be in tune with their environment in a way most of us can only dream of. Take hunting, for instance. They mastered the art of stealth, using harpoons with detachable heads to catch seals. Imagine lying silently by a breathing hole in the ice, waiting for a seal to pop up for air. It's not just patience, it's a calculated dance with the rhythm of nature, with the stakes being life or death. But let's spare a thought for the romanticized notion of the noble savage, untouched by the world. Sounds poetic, doesn't it? Except it's bunk. The Inuit were skilled traders and negotiators, not some frozen relics of a bygone era. They adapted to new technologies and ideas, picking up iron tools and guns when Europeans stumbled upon their icy doorstep. They didn't just sit around waiting for change. They actively engaged with it. In fact, by the time the whalers and fur traders arrived in the 18th and 19th centuries, the Inuit were already seasoned in the art of barter, trading furs and meat for metal tools and other goods. It wasn't a case of the poor natives being saved by the savvy Europeans. Quite the contrary. They were shrewd businessmen, fully aware of the value of their resources. So much for the myth of the isolated, primitive hunter. Now, if you're wondering about the big picture, why this matters, it's because the Inuit story is one of resilience and ingenuity. They adapted to one of the harshest climates on Earth using nothing but what nature provided, and a hefty dose of creativity. They didn't just survive in the Arctic. They made it their home, proving once again that necessity is the mother of invention. And let's not overlook the social structures that kept the Inuit communities thriving. They weren't just bands of wandering nomads. They had complex family networks and social systems that ensured everyone had a role and a purpose. It was all about balance between man and nature, individual and community. It's a lesson in sustainability that's as relevant today as it was 1,000 years ago. So, next time you hear about the Inuit, think beyond the igloos and the cold. Think of the incredible journey they took across the ice, the ingenious ways they used every resource, and the vibrant culture they maintained against the odds. It's not just a story of survival. It's a testament to human adaptability and spirit. And as you shiver at the thought of minus 50 degrees C, remember, these folks called it home. So, as you shiver at the thought of minus 50 degrees C, remember, these folks called it home. But let's get real about what it took to put dinner on the ice table. Spoiler alert, it wasn't just a matter of throwing a line in the water and hoping for the best. Nope, hunting was a full-contact sport with nature, and the Inuit were the pros. First off, let's talk about the harpoon, the MVP in the Inuit arsenal. This wasn't your garden variety spear. It was a masterpiece of innovation. Crafted from driftwood with bone or ivory tips, it had a detachable head connected to a float made from seal bladders. Why? Because when you're hunting in the Arctic, losing your catch to the depth isn't an option. That float was the Inuit version of a GPS tracker, making sure the prey didn't vanish into the icy abyss. You could say these folks were the original masters of catch and release, except, without the release part. Now, if you're picturing a lone hunter heroically poised on the ice, harpoon at the ready, reel it in. In reality, this was often a community affair. While one person might have been the lucky one to strike, others were essential to the process. Spotters, helpers, and of course, the folks who hauled the catch back to camp. It was a team sport, and everyone had a role. It's like the ultimate potluck, except instead of showing up with a sad bag of chips, you're bringing home a seal. Speaking of community, let's dive into the kayaks. These sleek vessels weren't just for leisurely paddles through Arctic waters. Crafted from driftwood and covered in sealskin, they were silent, efficient, and nearly invisible on the water. The kayak was a one-person deal, but don't be fooled into thinking it was a solitary endeavor. Hunting from a kayak required collaboration, spotters on shore, signals, and the coordination of multiple hunters to corral prey. It was synchronized swimming Inuit style. But let's not get too misty-eyed about the romance of it all. The reality was brutally practical. The Inuit had to work together because failure wasn't an option. Miss a catch, and the village might go hungry. It wasn't just about filling bellies. It was about survival, plain and simple. And this brings us to the idea of the noble hunter roaming the ice with a stoic gaze. While it makes for great storytelling, the truth is, these hunters were more akin to blue-collar workers, grinding out a living in the most unforgiving conditions on Earth. Now, let's take a detour into the sharing economy, Inuit style. Forget Uber and Airbnb. The original gig economy was all about reciprocity. If you caught a seal, you didn't just hoard it like a dragon with a hoarding problem. You shared it. The meat, the fat, the skin, everything had a place and purpose. The community relied on this system to ensure everyone stayed warm and fed. It's a bit like your neighborhood potluck, except with the very real threat of starvation if you skip dessert. And here's a twist for you. This wasn't some utopian dream. It was a hard-nosed economic necessity. In the Arctic, resources were too scarce to waste, and one person's success meant survival for the group. It was an intricate dance of give and take, where everyone had skin in the game, literally. Think of it as socialism with a side of blubber. If your modern mind is spinning with visions of gig work and shared economies, you're not wrong. Today, we talk about the gig economy like it's the latest tech innovation, but the Inuit were light years ahead. Their version was less about tech platforms and more about community resilience. It's almost as if they knew that survival in a harsh environment required a collective effort. Imagine that. A society where everyone has to pitch in, not because it's trendy, but because it's life or death. So when you hear about the Inuit hunters, remember they weren't just lone wolves braving the cold. They were part of a finely tuned machine where every person and every action mattered. The romantic notion of the noble hunter is just a sliver of the truth. The real story is one of grit, collaboration, and a social system that ensured no one was left out in the cold. As much as we love the legend, the reality is far more inspiring and a little bit humbling. And on that note, let's pause. There's more to this story, and it's just as thrilling as a seal's first breath at a breathing hole. Stay tuned as we explore the vibrant cultural tapestry the Inuit wove from snow, ice, and sheer determination. The The Arctic adventure continues, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. But hold on to your mucklucks, because we're diving into the most fascinating part of the Inuit survival saga, their diet. Spoiler alert, it's not just about chomping on blubber like it's the latest foodie trend. And if you thought your paleo diet was hardcore, well, get ready to be schooled by the original high-fat, high-protein maestros. First off, let's talk about the nutritional science behind the Inuit diet. Now, imagine trying to burn calories while shivering at minus 50 degrees C. Yep, that's the Arctic for you, a place where merely existing is a full-time workout. The Inuit diet was a powerhouse of energy, with a focus on fat that would make a keto enthusiast blush. Why fat? Because it packs more than double the calories per gram compared to carbs or protein. 9 calories versus 4, to be exact. In an environment where food isn't just scarce, but a matter of life and death, every calorie counts. But before you start picturing them gnawing on raw blubber like it's a Michelin-starred delicacy, let's set the record straight. The Inuit diet wasn't just about eating fat for the sake of it. It was a strategic choice, driven by necessity, and honed over centuries of living in one of the planet's harshest climates. Seals, whales, and fish weren't just menu items. They were the linchpins of survival. Take seal meat, for example, rich in protein and fat, providing the perfect blend of nutrients to keep those metabolic fires burning. And let's not forget about vitamin C, that elusive little nutrient necessary to ward off scurvy. You'd think in a land devoid of oranges, the Inuit would be in trouble, but nope, they had it covered. Raw meat and fish, particularly the liver, provided just enough of this essential vitamin, thanks to some nifty biological quirks. So, while Europeans on long sea voyages were dropping like flies from scurvy, the Inuit were happily munching away on their nutrient-rich fare, likely with a side of smug satisfaction. Now, brace yourself for some culinary ingenuity that could rival your favorite cooking show. Preservation was key, because let's face it, there's no popping down to the local market when you live on the ice. Enter the ice cellar, or as I like to call it, the Arctic's answer to the smart fridge. Dug into the permafrost, these underground storage spaces kept food fresh without the need for any modern gadgetry. Temperatures inside remained just below freezing, allowing the Inuit to store meat and fish for months on end. It's like nature's own deep freeze, minus the energy bill. But the preservation magic didn't stop there. Think of dried fish and smoked meat, a staple that could last through the bleakest of winters. Drying and smoking weren't just practical, they were essential. These methods prevented spoilage and concentrated the nutrients, turning a simple catch into a long-lasting supply of energy. It's a bit like turning your car into a hybrid, a little tweak that massively boosts efficiency. And here's where the myth-busting comes in. We often romanticize the Inuit as noble savages, living in harmony with nature, but the reality was far more practical. This wasn't about a spiritual connection to the land. It was about surviving in a place that offered no mercy. The Inuit diet wasn't a choice. It was a necessity, honed by a deep understanding of their environment and passed down through generations. Speaking of passing down knowledge, the Inuit had this incredible knack for oral tradition, ensuring that critical survival skills were never lost. While we're busy recording every little thing on our smartphones, they relied on storytelling to teach the next generation. This wasn't just about preserving history. It was about ensuring that vital knowledge, how to hunt, what to eat, how to stay alive, was never forgotten. In a way, it's like the ultimate open-source survival guide, free and accessible to all who needed it. So, the next time you're sipping on a green smoothie or munching on kale chips, consider the Inuit diet, a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability in the face of extreme adversity. It's a reminder that sometimes survival doesn't come from the latest health fad, but from centuries of practical, hard-earned wisdom. Now, let's pivot to another fascinating aspect of Inuit life, the communal nature of their eating habits. You see, in the Arctic, eating wasn't just a solitary affair. It was a communal experience. Picture this: a family gathered around a seal feast, sharing not just the meat but the stories and traditions that came with it. It was social, it was bonding, and it was survival, all rolled into one. And here's a fun fact to chew on. The Inuit had a way of eating that could rival the most disciplined intermittent fasters. They'd often engage in periods of feasting followed by fasting, dictated by the availability of food. In a land where the landscape could change on a dime, flexibility wasn't just an advantage, it was a necessity. Let's also give a nod to the sheer resourcefulness of the Inuit when it came to using every part of the animal. Remember, this wasn't just about eating to survive. It was about using every resource to its fullest. Bones became tools, skins became clothing, and organs were consumed for their vital nutrients. It's like the ultimate zero-waste lifestyle, long before it was trendy. So, as we wrap up this exploration of the Inuit diet, let's dispel the notion of the noble savage once and for all. The Inuit weren't just surviving on the edge of the world. They were thriving, thanks to a diet and lifestyle perfectly adapted to their environment. It's a story of resilience, ingenuity, and a deep understanding of the natural world, one that continues to inspire and humble us today. And as we pause here, ready to pick up this Arctic adventure in the next part, remember this. The Inuit didn't just adapt to their world, they mastered it. They turned the harshest conditions into an opportunity for innovation, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary stories come from the most ordinary acts of survival. Stay tuned, because there's more to uncover in this icy epic, and trust me, it's just as captivating as a seal's first breath at a breathing hole. Speaking of mastering the elements, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Inuit clothing and shelter. Because folks, when you're living in a place that makes Antarctica look like a tropical getaway, fashion isn't just about looking good, it's about not freezing to death. The Inuit didn't just wear clothes, they engineered them, turning caribou and seals into haute couture of the highest order. Move over Milan, the Arctic's got its own fashion week, and it's all about survival chic. Let's start with the basics, layers. If you think layering is just a heart tip from your favorite fashion blog, the Inuit are here to teach you a thing or two. Their clothing was a symphony of materials, meticulously designed to trap heat. We're talking inner layers made from caribou fur, worn fur side in to keep that precious warmth close to the body. On top of that, they'd throw on a layer of sealskin, because nothing says, "I'm staying toasty," like a natural waterproof barrier. It's the Arctic's answer to Gore-Tex, with no need for a fancy brand name. But it wasn't just about piling on the caribou couture. The Inuit understood the science of heat retention long before thermodynamics became a thing. Ever heard of air pockets? Those tiny spaces in caribou fur trapped heat like nobody's business, creating a buffer against the biting cold. It's like having your own personal heating system, minus the outrageous utility bill. And when you're contending with wind chills that could strip paint off a barn, that's a game changer. Now, let's take a closer look at the footwear, because frostbite is no one's friend. Inuit boots, known as kamiet, were nothing short of engineering marvels. Made from sealskin, these boots were waterproof and flexible, perfect for traversing icy landscapes. They'd often be lined with grass for extra insulation, because why let anything go to waste? It's resourcefulness at its finest, a bit like turning your lawn into a heated blanket. Speaking of resourcefulness, let's talk about the igloo. The igloo, a symbol of Arctic romance, the cozy snow dome where you imagine sipping hot cocoa while the northern lights dance overhead. But before you get too comfortable, let's shatter that snow globe fantasy with a dose of reality. Constructing an igloo wasn't just child's play with snow bricks. It was backbreaking work that demanded skill and precision. Picture this. You, armed with a snow knife, carving out blocks from the hard-packed snow. Not just any snow, mind you, but the right kind, dense and firm, perfect for stacking. You'd cut each block to size, like a sculptor chiseling marble, but instead of creating a masterpiece for a gallery, you're building the only thing standing between you and hypothermia. Romantic, right. An experienced builder could whip up an igloo in about an hour, but don't let that fool you into thinking it was a stroll in the park. The blocks had to be arranged in a spiral, each one carefully angled to create the iconic dome shape. It's like playing Tetris, but with snow, and the stakes are just a tad higher, like, your life. Once completed, the igloo was surprisingly sturdy, capable of withstanding fierce Arctic winds. Inside, temperatures could rise to a balmy 0 degrees C, positively tropical compared to the frozen wasteland outside. Who needs central heating when you've got physics on your side? But here's the kicker. Keeping an igloo in top shape was a full-time job. Snow would drift, ice would settle, and before you knew it, your cozy little dome could turn into a soggy mess. Ventilation was key to prevent suffocation from carbon dioxide buildup, so small holes were left in the roof. So much for the carefree image of an igloo as a winter wonderland escape. In reality, It was more like a never-ending home improvement project, with Mother Nature constantly trying to undo your hard work. And while we're busting myths, let's talk about the communal aspect of igloo living. These weren't solitary retreats for the introspective Inuit. They were often part of a larger village, each igloo connected by a network of tunnels and passageways. It was like the original condo complex, but instead of shared amenities like a pool or gym, you had a shared battle against the elements. It was all about cooperation and collaboration. Because when the Arctic throws its worst at you, teamwork isn't just nice, it's survival. The economic context here is fascinating. In a world where resources were as scarce as a snowball in the Sahara, the Inuit couldn't just go off and do their own thing. Every piece of clothing, every igloo block, was a testament to a community working together, each person contributing to the whole. It's a bit like the ultimate DIY project, except instead of Pinterest fails, you had the harsh reality of Arctic survival. As we pause here, reflecting on the incredible ingenuity of the Inuit, remember that these weren't just quaint customs or romanticized traditions. They were hard-nosed survival strategies, honed over centuries in one of Earth's most unforgiving environments. The Inuit didn't just survive the Arctic, they thrived, using every tool and trick at their disposal to turn the odds in their favor. So, next time you zip up your high-tech parka or snuggle into your insulated boots, consider the innovation of those who came before. The Inuit had it all figured out long before we ever dreamed of modern outdoor gear, proving once again that necessity truly is the mother of invention. And as we continue to unravel this Arctic epic, stay tuned for more tales of resilience, creativity, and the extraordinary lengths humans will go to make the harshest places feel like home. As we continue our frosty journey through Inuit history, let's fast forward to the modern age, where the challenges are as real as a polar bear in your backyard. The Inuit, those maestros of adaptation, have faced yet another curveball, climate change. Now, if you thought the Arctic was just a frozen wasteland that couldn't possibly get any tougher, think again. As the ice melts and the seasons shift, the Inuit are scrambling to adapt yet again, and spoiler alert, they're handling it with the kind of resilience that would put most of us to shame. First, let's talk about the ice, more specifically, the sea ice that's been a playground, a highway, and a hunting ground for generations. This isn't just some pretty backdrop for Instagram selfies, it's a literal lifeline. But thanks to climate change, we're seeing less of it. In fact, the Arctic is warming at roughly twice the global average rate, making traditional hunting routes as unpredictable as a cat on catnip. For the Inuit, this means more than a mere inconvenience. It's a fundamental shift in how they interact with their environment. Take hunting, for instance. Remember those harpoon-wielding hunts that were once a communal affair? These days, the ice is melting earlier and freezing later, leaving hunters with a shrinking window to gather resources. It's like your favorite store, suddenly deciding it'll only open for 2 hours a day. This isn't just a logistical nightmare. It's an existential threat to a way of life that's persisted for millennia. The impact is quantifiable and devastating. In some areas, traditional hunting yields have decreased by as much as 50%, forcing communities to rely more on expensive, imported foods. Imagine swapping your freshly caught seal steaks for overpriced, frozen fish sticks. Not quite the same culinary adventure, is it? Then there's the ripple effect on culture. You see, hunting isn't just about putting food on the table. It's a cornerstone of Inuit identity. The skills, stories, and social bonds forged during these expeditions are the threads that weave the community together. When climate change cuts those threads, it's not just about losing a meal. It's about losing a piece of yourself. But here's the kicker. The Inuit aren't just sitting around waiting for the ice to come back. No, they're tapping into that legendary adaptability, finding new ways to navigate a rapidly changing world. Take the Arctic Council, for instance, a high-level intergovernmental forum where the Inuit have a seat at the table, influencing policies that affect their homeland. It's like the ultimate board meeting, except instead of discussing quarterly earnings, they're tackling climate policies and sustainable development. In fact, Inuit groups have been at the forefront of advocating for climate action, using their first-hand experiences to argue for meaningful change. And let's not overlook technology. Yes, even in the Arctic, smartphones are a thing. GPS and satellite imagery have replaced traditional navigation methods, allowing hunters to track ice conditions and animal movements with unprecedented precision. It's a little ironic, isn't it? The very technology that contributes to climate change is also helping the Inuit adapt to its effects. It's like using fire to fight fire, except in this case, the fire is a melting ice flow. Economically, this technological embrace isn't just a survival tactic, it's a lifeline. By integrating modern tech with traditional knowledge, the Inuit are creating new economic opportunities, from ecotourism to sustainable fisheries. They're not just surviving, they're innovating, proving once again that necessity is indeed the mother of invention, or in this case, the mother of adaptation. So, what can we learn from the Inuit? For starters, they teach us the power of resilience and the importance of community. In a world where most of us would struggle to survive without Wi-Fi, the Inuit remind us that adaptability and ingenuity are the real survival skills. They've been bending but not breaking, navigating challenges with a grace that's both humbling and inspiring. And as the rest of us grapple with climate change, their story offers a blueprint for resilience. Face challenges head-on, collaborate, and never stop innovating. In this icy epic, the Inuit have shown us that survival isn't just about braving the elements, it's about embracing change and finding strength in community. As we wrap up this journey, remember that the real story of the Inuit isn't just one of hardship and cold. It's a testament to human ingenuity and spirit. They've turned the harshest conditions into a canvas for innovation, proving that with a little creativity and a lot of determination, we can thrive, even on the edge of the world. So, next time you're huddled under a blanket, streaming your favorite series, spare a thought for the Inuit, who've been riding their own saga of survival and adaptation for centuries. They're not just surviving the Arctic, they're mastering it. And in a world that's constantly throwing new challenges our way, that's a lesson we could all stand to learn. In a world where Netflix binges are as common as breathing, let's travel back to a time when entertainment came in a more durable form. Clay. Welcome to the Nark civilization, a society that popped up in Nigeria around 1000 BCE and decided that the best way to be remembered was through some snazzy terracotta art. Imagine these sculptures as the ancient equivalent of viral TikTok videos. Everyone wanted to see them. No one quite understood how they became so popular, and they left us with more questions than answers. The Nark people were like the Banksy of their time, crafting sculptures that were both enigmatic and captivating. These terracotta figures weren't just your typical clay blobs. They were detailed, expressive, and sometimes downright bizarre. With heads larger than life and eyes that stared directly into your soul, these pieces were conversation starters long before the internet made that a thing. The Nark terracotta pieces are scattered across Nigeria's landscape like breadcrumbs from a civilization eager to leave a mark. And leave a mark they did. These artifacts became the Rosetta Stones for understanding the rich tapestry of African history. In the 20th century, when these artifacts were unearthed, they flipped the script on what we thought we knew about Africa's past. Until then, the continent's history was often, mistakenly, glossed over in favor of more glamorous narratives from Europe and Asia. But the Nark terracotta sculptures were the mic drop that forced historians to sit up and pay attention. They were a loud, clay-based declaration that African civilizations were thriving, complex, and artistically sophisticated long before colonial historians cared to admit. But how did these sculptures come to light in the modern era? Well, like most great discoveries, it was a mix of luck, curiosity, and accidental genius. In 1928, near the village of Nark, a British archaeologist named Bernard Fagg stumbled upon these terracotta treasures while poking around the tin mines. Imagine finding a Picasso in your grandma's attic. That's about the level of surprise and excitement he must have felt. With that discovery, the floodgates opened, leading to more digs and more astonishing finds. Now, let's talk about why these sculptures are such a big deal. First off, they date back to a time when many parts of the world were still figuring out the whole civilization thing. The Nark had already mastered the art of iron smelting alongside their sculpting skills, making them technological trendsetters of their era. Their iron tools and weapons were game changers, giving them an edge in agriculture and warfare. But more than just technical prowess, these sculptures represented a cultural zenith. Each piece tells a story, and though we're still deciphering the Nark language, or lack thereof, the art speaks volumes. These figures often depicted people in elaborate attire, suggesting a society with social hierarchies and possibly even fashion trends. It's like scrolling through an ancient Instagram feed full of influencers posing with oversized accessories and intense facial expressions. Of course, with great art comes great speculation. The purpose of these sculptures is still a hot topic among historians. Were they religious idols, status symbols, or just the narc version of garden gnomes? We may never know for sure, but that's part of their charm. The mystery keeps us coming back, eager to piece together the puzzle of narc life. Now, let's not get too misty-eyed about the narc without acknowledging the tougher truths. While the terracotta sculptures are masterpieces, they also hint at a society that was far from utopian. The presence of weapons and fortified settlements suggests a civilization familiar with conflict and defense. And while their art has survived, much of their daily life remains a mystery, highlighting the gaps in our understanding of pre-colonial African history. But hey, isn't that the beauty of archaeology? It's the ultimate form of detective work, where each discovery reshapes our narrative and reminds us of the intricate web of human history. The narc civilization, with its artistic flair and technological advancements, challenges us to rethink what we know about Africa's past. It's a reminder that history is never static. It's a living, breathing entity that evolves with every clay shard uncovered. In the end, the narc's legacy is a testament to the power of art to transcend time. Their sculptures continue to awe, inspire, and perplex, proving that sometimes the oldest stories are the most captivating. So, next time you see a viral video or meme, remember the narc, a civilization that turned clay into a canvas and left an indelible mark on history. Speaking of indelible marks, let's shift from the narc's sculptural genius to another of their party tricks, their iron-smelting prowess. Picture this. It's roughly 500 BCE, and while some folks around the globe are still figuring out how to make a decent wheel, the narc are already deep into their metallurgical magic, churning out iron like it's going out of style. If there were an ancient equivalent of the tech industry's disruptive innovation, the narc's iron-smelting skills would be the Steve Jobs unveiling the iPhone moment of their time. Now, why was this such a big deal, you ask? Iron, my friends, was the Bronze Age's cooler, more efficient cousin. It was stronger, more durable, and made for some seriously effective tools and weapons. The narc weren't just playing with fire, they were mastering it, using furnaces that could reach temperatures of about 200 degrees C, hot enough to give even a modern-day blacksmith a run for their money. This technological leap put them light years ahead in the regional power game. With iron tools, the narc could farm more effectively, clear land faster, and harvest crops with the efficiency of an ancient John Deere tractor. More food meant more people, and more people meant a thriving, bustling society. But they didn't stop at agriculture. They went all in on turning iron into weapons, too. Because, let's face it, there's nothing like a sharp spear to make your neighbors think twice about borrowing your goats without asking. But how did this metallurgical expertise translate to the broader economic stage? Glad you asked. The narc's iron-smelting capabilities gave them a serious leg up, or a spear point, if you will, in the regional trade networks that crisscrossed West Africa. Their iron goods were like the ancient version of blue-chip stocks, highly valued and in constant demand. This wasn't just a local trade gig. We're talking about extensive networks that reached far beyond Nigeria's borders. The narc's strategic location in central Nigeria placed them at a crossroads of trade routes that linked the trans-Saharan trade to the coastal regions. Imagine the bustling activity as traders moved goods like textiles, salt, and of course, iron across vast distances. The narc were not just passive players in this economic dance. They were conducting it. Their iron products were exchanged for other goods, bringing wealth and influence to their society. This mastery of iron smelting didn't just make them wealthy. It helped weave the economic fabric of West Africa. The narc civilization became an economic linchpin, setting the stage for later West African empires, like the Mali and Songhai, to build upon their innovations. It's like they handed down the technological baton that would eventually lead to the grand orchestras of trade empires centuries later. And here's a kicker for you. The narc's expertise in metalwork might have even influenced other regions. Some historians suggest that their technology could have spread to other cultures through trade and interaction, sparking a sort of ancient knowledge-sharing economy. It's the original open source movement, if you will. Except instead of software, it was iron, and instead of engineers in hoodies, it was skilled artisans in loincloths. But let's not get too carried away with romanticizing the Narc as the benevolent tech gurus of their time. The reality was a bit harsher and more complex. While their iron supremacy meant prosperity, it also meant power struggles. With great iron comes great responsibility, or more accurately, great opportunities for conflict. Having the best weapons on the block isn't just a status symbol, it's a political statement. It's like saying, we could be friends, or we could be frenemies. Your call. The Narc's Iron Age wasn't just about shiny new tools and economic boom. It was about survival in a world where resources were limited and competition was fierce. The presence of fortified settlements suggests these folks were no strangers to defending their turf. They understood the ancient rule of thumb, always have an exit strategy, or in their case, a well-armed defense plan. So, while we can applaud the Narc for their technological and artistic achievements, we must also acknowledge the stark realities of their world. They lived in a time where the line between friend and foe was as sharp as the iron blades they crafted. Their legacy is a testament to resilience, a society that thrived in the face of environmental and social challenges. In a world where the only thing constant is change, the Narc adapted, and in doing so, left a mark on history that still echoes today. In the grand tapestry of history, the Narc civilization reminds us that technology and art can flourish even in the most challenging environments. They were pioneers, not just in creating beautiful artifacts or mastering iron, but in laying the groundwork for complex societies that would follow. Their story isn't just a footnote in African history. It's a chapter that challenges us to rethink the narratives we've been told. So, the next time you marvel at a piece of modern technology or admire a stunning work of art, give a nod to the Narc. They were, after all, the ancient influencers of their era, turning iron into innovation and clay into timeless treasures. As we continue to unearth their secrets, let's keep the momentum going and see what other surprises this remarkable civilization has in store for us. As we dig deeper into the Narc civilization, let's pause and ask ourselves, what does it take to lead a society that's already mastered iron and art without the benefit of modern distractions like cat videos and celebrity gossip? Spoiler alert. A lot of savvy, a dash of diplomacy, and perhaps a healthy dose of sheer bravado. The Narc people navigated the complexities of leadership not through the latest Twitter polls, but through systems that, shockingly, did not involve a single televised debate where candidates were grilled on their favorite color. The Narc's political structure was likely as intricate as their artistic creations, although the exact details have been somewhat lost to time. No, there wasn't a king strutting around in a crown of terracotta, but what we can infer is a society that was both hierarchical and communal. Picture a system where leadership might have been based on a combination of age, wisdom, and the good old merit of who could best solve disputes without reaching for their iron spear. It's a far cry from today's politics, where the loudest voice often wins the day. Now let's talk about power dynamics. The Narc seemingly managed their social hierarchies without resorting to the questionable style choices seen in modern political circles. You know, no oversized hats or garish ties here, just the timeless style of authority and respect. Some experts suggest that the leaders, possibly elders, or a council of wise folks, played a crucial role in decision-making. These individuals were likely responsible for organizing labor, managing resources like iron and food, and maintaining those all-important trade networks. It's as if they were the original project managers, minus the Gantt charts and endless Zoom meetings. But how did these leaders keep the peace and ensure everyone played nicely? Enter religion and art, the Narc's dual power tools for societal cohesion. Religion in Narc society wasn't about flashy rituals or megachurch-style gatherings. Instead, it was likely woven into the fabric of everyday life, with rituals and beliefs that reinforced social norms and values. Imagine a belief system that encouraged cooperation, respect, and harmony, qualities that made the whole community tick like a well-oiled machine. And let's be honest, a society that could churn out such impressive terracotta art likely had a spiritual backbone that celebrated creativity and expression. The art itself was more than decorative. It was a storytelling medium that captured the essence of Narc society. These sculptures often depicted people with intricate hairstyles, jewelry, and attire, hinting at the cultural and spiritual significance of their appearance. Unlike today's fashion shows, where the latest trend might be a dress made of meat, Narc fashion seemed to be about meaning and identity. Those elaborate headpieces and beads weren't just for show. They signified status, community roles, and perhaps even cosmological beliefs. And speaking of cosmology, the Narc might not have had telescopes, but they certainly had a sense of the universe's order. Their artistic motifs suggest a connection to nature and the cosmos, possibly reflecting a belief system that saw humans as part of a larger, interconnected world. It's a philosophy that feels oddly modern, even as we struggle today to balance our place in the natural world. Now, myths often paint ancient societies as idyllic utopias or barbaric dystopias. The Narc, however, were neither. They lived in a world where survival required both innovation and cooperation. Their leadership structures and belief systems reflect a pragmatic approach to governance. No divine right of kings here, just practical solutions to complex challenges. But let's not romanticize too much. While the Narc mastered the art of social organization, they did so in a world where resources were limited and competition was fierce. Neighboring groups would have been keenly interested in those iron-smelting techniques, and alliances were likely as crucial as trade. The political landscape wasn't a peaceful garden, but a dynamic arena where strength and strategy went hand in hand. In essence, the Narc civilization was a masterclass in balance. They balanced innovation with tradition, community spirit with individual achievement, and art with practicality. Their society was a vibrant tapestry woven from the threads of necessity and creativity, a reminder that even in the past, humans were endlessly resourceful. As we continue to explore the Narc, let's keep in mind that their story is not just about what they built or believed. It's about how they navigated the pressures of their environment, how they used their resources to forge a unique identity, and how they left a legacy that still inspires us today. The Narc were more than just ancient artisans or ironworkers. They were pioneers of social and political ingenuity. Their story isn't over yet, and as we uncover more, one thing is clear. They've left us a puzzle that's as compelling as their art, waiting to be pieced together one shard at a time. As we dig deeper into the Narc, let's tackle the age-old question. What on earth happened around 300 CE? Spoiler alert, it wasn't an alien abduction or a sudden vanishing act that would make David Copperfield jealous. No, the Narc civilization didn't pull a Houdini. They were more of a slow fade than a dramatic exit. So forget the romanticized tales of a mysterious disappearance. Let's unpack the real story. First, it's crucial to understand that civilizations rarely just vanish without a trace. More often, they undergo complex transformations, slowly morphing into something new or dispersing into smaller communities. The Narc were no different. The prevailing myth of their sudden disappearance is more about our love for dramatic narratives than historical accuracy. It turns out, history is less end seen and more to be continued. Economic shifts played a significant role in the Narc's gradual fade. Picture this, their iron-smelting prowess, while initially a game-changer, eventually faced competition. Other societies began catching up, and the once exclusive club of iron producers started issuing more memberships. As iron technology spread across West Africa, the Narc's economic monopoly waned. Think of it like the early days of the internet. At first, only select few had dial-up, but soon everyone and their neighbor was online, and the novelty wore off. Environmental factors also nudged the Narc toward change. Climate shifts around 300 CE made their homeland less hospitable. With diminishing resources, the Narc couldn't sustain their large settlements. It's like hosting a never-ending party where the food runs out and people slowly trickle home. The landscape itself became less forgiving, and as the land changed, so did the people's way of life. The Narc likely adapted by moving to more fertile areas or integrating with neighboring cultures. And let's not forget the social and political pressures that played a part. As larger empires and states emerged in West Africa, the Narc found themselves in a shifting geopolitical landscape. Smaller societies often get absorbed or fragmented under the weight of expanding neighbors. Picture a small-town diner suddenly surrounded by megamalls, It either adapts, gets bought out, or quietly closes its doors. The romantic idea of a civilization vanishing overnight is tempting, but the reality is much more nuanced. Recent scholarship debunks the notion of a dramatic collapse, pointing instead to a slow process of integration and transformation. As the Nark dispersed, their influence didn't just evaporate, it seeped into the cultural fabric of West Africa. Their artistic styles, metallurgical techniques, and social structures likely influenced future societies, leaving fingerprints on the pages of history. This gradual transformation highlights a crucial lesson. History is less about grand finales and more about evolutionary arcs. The Nark's legacy wasn't erased. It evolved, embedding itself in the cultures that followed. It's a bit like your favorite band going on hiatus, only to have its members join other groups. You can still hear echoes of the original tunes in new tracks. Of course, myths persist for a reason. They're captivating. The idea of a civilization vanishing is as alluring as a good mystery novel. But when we peel back the layers, we find a story that's rich in complexity, marked by adaptation and resilience. The Nark didn't disappear. They adapted to a changing world, and in doing so, they remind us that history is a continuum, not a series of isolated events. Now, while we're debunking myths, let's address another elephant in the historical room, the Nark's so-called lost language. It's true that no written records from the Nark civilization have been discovered, which has fueled the idea that they were a mysterious, silent society. But hold on to your hats. Absence of evidence doesn't mean evidence of absence. The Nark may have had a spoken language rich in oral tradition, passed down through generations rather than inscribed on stone tablets. The lack of written records doesn't diminish their sophistication. If anything, it highlights the diversity of human communication. The Nark's legacy is etched in clay and iron, not words, and their art speaks louder than any ancient manuscript. The terracotta figures are their voice, telling stories of a vibrant society with a deep connection to its cultural roots. So, while we might not have a Rosetta Stone for the Nark, we have their art and technology as a testament to their achievements. It's a reminder that history isn't just about what's written. It's about the traces left behind, the echoes that resonate through time. As we continue our journey through the Nark civilization, let's keep in mind that their story is far from over. Each new discovery adds a piece to the puzzle, challenging us to rethink the narratives we've been fed. The Nark were not a vanishing act, but a vital chapter in the history of West Africa. Their influence lingers, a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. In the end, the Nark civilization teaches us that history is full of slow fades and transformations, not just dramatic conclusions. It's a saga of resilience and adaptation, where the echoes of the past shape the present. So, next time you hear a tale of a vanished civilization, remember the Nark and their enduring legacy. They may not have left us with a script, but their story is written in the clay and iron that still captivate us today. So, while the Nark didn't leave us a written manifesto or a fancy stone tablet detailing their life's work, they did something arguably more impactful. They left a legacy that whispers through the corridors of time. Let's dive into how this ancient civilization continues to make waves, not just in Africa, but across the globe. First off, let's talk art. The Nark terracotta sculptures aren't just relics, they're cultural ambassadors. These pieces have found their way into museums worldwide, from the Louvre in Paris to the Met in New York, showcasing Africa's rich artistic heritage to millions of visitors. Each sculpture is like a time capsule, offering a glimpse into the lives and imaginations of people who lived over 2 millennia ago. And while the world was busy being dazzled by Greco-Roman marble, the Nark were mastering the art of clay. Their expressive figures with intricate details challenge the often Eurocentric narrative that sophisticated art began in Europe. But it's not just about aesthetics. The Nark art has had a profound impact on modern African artists, serving as a source of inspiration and cultural pride. Contemporary artists across the continent draw from the Nark's bold designs and motifs, blending them with modern themes to create art that's both a nod to the past and a statement for the present. It's like the Nark handed down a creative baton, and today's artists are running with it, crafting works that scream Africa in every brushstroke and chisel mark. This artistic influence is more than skin deep. It's a declaration of identity. In a world where African cultures have often been marginalized or misrepresented, the Nark art stands as a testament to a sophisticated, complex society that thrived long before the Western world acknowledged it. It's a mic drop moment in the ongoing conversation about Africa's place in world history, a clay-based clapback to anyone who ever doubted the continent's cultural depth. Now, let's shift gears and talk about a less glamorous but equally vital aspect of the Nark legacy: metallurgy. Remember the Nark's iron-smelting prowess? That wasn't just a quaint historical footnote. It laid the groundwork for the metalworking traditions that fueled later West African empires. The Nark's mastery of iron set the stage for the technological advancements that powered the likes of the Mali Empire and the Kingdom of Benin. Iron wasn't just a metal. It was the backbone of agriculture, warfare, and trade. The Nark may not have invented iron smelting, but they certainly perfected it, paving the way for a thriving iron industry that would shape the economic landscape of West Africa for centuries. Their techniques influenced the development of metallurgy across the region, leading to innovations that would have a lasting impact on African societies. Think of it as the ancient version of Silicon Valley, where one breakthrough led to a cascade of technological advancements, each propelling society further forward. But let's not sugarcoat it. The Nark's technological achievements were a double-edged sword. While iron made them prosperous, it also made them a target. As other societies recognized the value of iron, competition intensified. The ensuing power struggles could make Game of Thrones look like a friendly game of Monopoly. The Nark story reminds us that in the grand chessboard of history, technological advantage often comes with a side order of political intrigue. Speaking of politics, the Nark's societal structure left an indelible mark on the region. While we may not know the exact details of their governance, their apparent system of leadership, probably a mix of councils and elders, echoes through African societies even today. The emphasis on communal decision-making and respect for elders is a thread that runs through many African cultures, a testament to the enduring influence of the Nark's social organization. This brings us to one of the Nark's most enduring legacies, their role as a cultural touchstone. The Nark civilization, with its art and innovation, serves as a powerful symbol of African ingenuity and resilience. A world that often reduces Africa to a single story of conflict and poverty, the Nark provide a counter-narrative, a story of creativity, adaptation, and sophistication. They remind us that Africa's history is not a blank slate upon which others have written, but a rich tapestry woven by its own people. In modern African societies, the Nark legacy is celebrated not just in museums and art galleries, but in the very fabric of cultural identity. Festivals, educational programs, and cultural initiatives draw on Nark heritage to instill pride and awareness in younger generations. It's a way of saying, this is who we are, and this is where we come from. The Nark's influence is a rallying cry for cultural preservation and innovation, a reminder that history is not just about the past, but a guide for the future. Globally, the appreciation of Nark art and history has challenged stereotypes and prompted a re-evaluation of Africa's place in the world's cultural and historical narrative. As more people become aware of the Nark civilization, the conversation about Africa's contributions to world history becomes richer and more nuanced. It's a slow but steady shift toward acknowledging the continent's vital role in shaping human civilization. And let's not forget the Nark's contribution to the dialogue about cultural heritage and preservation. As artifacts continue to be unearthed, questions of ownership and repatriation arise. Who gets to tell the Nark story? Where do these artifacts belong? These are complex questions with no easy answers, but they are crucial to the ongoing discussion about global heritage and the rights of nations to their historical treasures. In wrapping up, let's return to the notion of the Nark as a punchline. Sure, Nark might sound like the setup to a corny joke, but their influence is anything but laughable. The Nark civilization is a cornerstone of African history, a testament to the creativity and resilience of its people. Their legacy lives on in the art, technology, and cultural identity of modern Africa, a legacy that challenges us to look beyond the simplistic narratives we've been fed. So, the next time you hear a knock-knock joke, remember the Nark. They're the original masters of the unexpected, the ancient influencers who turned clay and iron into timeless legacies. As we continue to explore their story, let's celebrate the Narc for what they truly are, a civilization that transformed the world in ways we're still discovering. And that, my friends, is no joke. In the land of Portugal, circa 1497, where the streets were filled with the aroma of salted cod and the dreams of a spice-laden future, Vasco da Gama was about to embark on a journey that would make him the rock star of maritime exploration. But let's hit pause on the Vasco fanfare and rewind a bit to set the stage for his epic voyage. This was a time when Portugal was itching for a slice of the spice trade pie, which was, quite literally, the hardest commodity of the day. Pepper, cinnamon, and cloves weren't just for flavoring grandma's stew. They were the Bitcoin of the 15th century, and everyone wanted in. And why was this such a big deal, you ask? Easy. Economics, my friend. Portugal, a small nation with big dreams, was on a mission to bypass the middlemen, namely the Venetians and the Ottomans, who held a vice-like grip on the overland spice routes. The price markup was enough to make a king's eyes water. And King Manuel, I was not a man who enjoyed a good cry. He was more of a, let's find a sea route to India and rake in the profits kind of guy. And that's exactly what he did. Enter Vasco da Gama, a man with more than just sea legs. He had sea ambition. Born into nobility in the coastal town of Sines around 1460, Vasco was no stranger to the ocean's call. His father had been a knight, and while we don't have the family dinner conversations on record, you can bet they involved tales of adventure and the occasional grumble about the price of saffron. Now, let's talk tech, because Vasco wasn't exactly setting sail on a yacht with satellite navigation. This was the age of the caravel, the ship that was the medieval answer to the sports car, but with a few more ropes and sails. These beauties could zip along the coastlines and handle the open ocean like a dream. But dreams can quickly become nightmares when you're trying to navigate uncharted waters without a map app. Instead, Vasco and his crew relied on the astrolabe, a nifty little gadget that was basically the Swiss Army knife of navigation. It helped them figure out latitude by measuring the angle of the sun. Of course, accuracy varied widely depending on whether the device was wielded by a seasoned navigator or a guy who thought the sun rose in the west. Then there was the cross staff, which, if used incorrectly, could leave you with a black eye and still lost at sea. King Manuel I, ever the visionary, wasn't just sending Vasco off with a pat on the back and a packed lunch. The expedition was a significant investment, a gamble really. The fleet consisted of 4 ships, São Gabriel, São Rafael, Berrio, and an unnamed supply ship, which was probably still waiting for its sponsorship deal to come through. With 170 men on board and provisions to last the journey, the expedition was a logistical marvel. But let's not romanticize things too much. The life of a sailor was about as glamorous as a mud puddle. Food was often salted, hardtack biscuits that could double as hockey pucks, and fresh water was a rare treat. Add to that the constant threat of scurvy, and it's a wonder anyone volunteered for these gigs. Yet volunteer they did, driven by the promise of riches, adventure, and let's face it, the hope of not dying in the same place they were born. Speaking of promises, King Manuel had a few tricks up his royal sleeves. You see, Portugal wasn't just looking for spices. They were on a divine mission, or so they claimed. The king, with a flair for the dramatic, dubbed the expedition a holy crusade. The goal, to spread Christianity, and subtly, to stick it to the Muslim traders who dominated the Indian Ocean. Nothing like a bit of religious fervor to spice up an economic venture. So, with the blessings of the church, the hopes of a nation, and a decent supply of salted meat, Vasco da Gama set sail from Lisbon on July 8, 1497. It was a voyage that would take him over 24,000 miles, and nearly 2 years to complete. Along the way, he would face storms that could make even the hardiest sailor cry for his mother and meet locals who probably wondered why on earth these pale guys were so obsessed with pepper. But before getting ahead of ourselves, let's not forget the man who made it all possible, King Manuel I. If Vasco was the rock star, Manuel was the manager, pulling the strings and making sure the show went on. He was a king with a vision, a man who understood that glory lay not just in conquest but in commerce. And while he might not have been the one braving the high seas, he He was the one making sure Portugal's flag flew high on the global stage. Thus, with a hardy wave, and perhaps a few crossed fingers, Vasco da Gama and his crew sailed into the unknown. Their journey would be fraught with peril, discovery, and the occasional bout of seasickness, but it would cement their place in the annals of history. And as for that spice trade, well, let's just say they were about to turn the world upside down in their quest for a better tasting stew. So, just as Da Gama and his crew were about to turn the world upside down for a better tasting stew, they set sail on the Atlantic, eyes gleaming with dreams of spices and perhaps a bit of existential dread. It wasn't long before reality hit them like a rogue wave. You see, the ocean is a bit of a diva, unpredictable, and not easily impressed by human ambition. The first leg of their journey took them down the west coast of Africa, a route well trodden by Portuguese explorers who had been inching their way further south for decades. You might think this was smooth sailing all the way down to the Cape of Good Hope, but you'd be wrong. This was the late 15th century, after all, and maritime navigation was basically a high-stakes guessing game with the stars. And if the stars weren't visible because of cloudy skies, well, good luck not ending up in Antarctica. The fleet made its first notable stop in what is now modern-day Mozambique. Now, the Portuguese had this pesky habit of assuming they were God's gift to whatever coast they happened to land on, and Da Gama was no exception. His diplomatic skills were about as sharp as a butter knife. When they dropped anchor near the port of Mozambique, Da Gama tried his hand at diplomacy, which to him meant showing off his shiny armor and hoping it would intimidate the locals into submission. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. The local sultan, understandably unimpressed with Da Gama's bling and bluster, decided to humor the strangers. He entertained Da Gama with a bit of local hospitality, probably while wondering what these Portuguese wanted besides a tan. Vasco's men, in return, tried to pass off their meager trinkets as valuable gifts. The Sultan, clearly not in the mood for yard sale rejects, quickly saw through this and decided he'd had enough of these European antics. Things got awkward fast when Da Gama's attempts to secure a pilot to guide them to India were met with suspicion. The Sultan, perhaps sensing these sailors had more gall than gold, decided to play a little game of his own. He sent Da Gama a pilot, but he also sent word ahead to his allies in Mombasa, suggesting they should be ready to deal with these pesky Portuguese in a less than hospitable manner. Da Gama, oblivious to the brewing trouble, sailed on to Mombasa. However, the welcome mat was nowhere to be found. Instead, they were greeted with the kind of hostility usually reserved for uninvited guests who overstay their welcome. The locals in Mombasa had heard the rumors and were in no mood for Da Gama's swaggering bravado. Instead of gifts, they offered threats, and Vasco quickly realized it was time to move on. Their next stop was Melindi, a bit further north along the coast. Here, Da Gama's luck took a turn for the better. The Sultan of Melindi, perhaps seeing economic opportunity where others saw a nuisance, was far more welcoming. He provided Da Gama with the pilot he desperately needed, an experienced navigator named Ahmad ibn Majid. This was a major win for Da Gama, as Majid knew the Indian Ocean like the back of his hand and was key in helping them finally chart a course to India. Meanwhile, life on board the ships was less than idyllic. The men were cramped, the food was, shall we say, distinctly lacking in spice, and scurvy was lurking like the grim reaper in the shadows. Fresh water was a luxury, and the crew were likely starting to question their life choices. Morale was as low as a limbo bar at a pirate party, but the promise of riches kept them from jumping ship, literally. Speaking of pirates, the Indian Ocean was notorious for them, and Da Gama's fleet wasn't exactly stealthy. The sight of sails on the horizon was often enough to send the crew into a frenzy, as pirate ships were the last thing they needed while trying to navigate unfamiliar waters. But as luck would have it, they managed to avoid any major confrontations, though one could imagine Da Gama's nerves were as frayed as the rigging. Finally, after months at sea and a litany of lessons in humility, Da Gama and his crew arrived on the shores of Calicut, now Kozhikode. In May 1498, this was the moment they had been waiting for, the gateway to the spice-rich lands of India. But if Da Gama thought he'd be greeted with open arms and a welcoming committee, he was sorely mistaken. The local ruler, known as the Zamorin, was not exactly rolling out the red carpet. Da Gama's first impression wasn't helped by his insistence on presenting cheap trinkets as royal gifts. The Zamorin, accustomed to receiving fine silks and precious gems from other traders, was less than impressed with Da Gama's offerings of woolen cloth and hats, which were about as useful in India's tropical climate as an ice cube in the Sahara. This cultural faux pas set the tone for a rocky relationship. Despite the less-than-stellar start, Da Gama was determined to make a deal. The Portuguese dream of tapping directly into the spice trade was so close they could practically taste it. The Zamorin, seeing an opportunity to play the Portuguese against their Arab rivals, allowed Da Gama to trade, but the terms were not exactly favorable. Da Gama, realizing that he had little leverage, grudgingly accepted. And so, with a less-than-bountiful cargo of spices and a trove of lessons in humility, Da Gama prepared for the return journey to Portugal. The voyage back would be no less perilous, with storms, scurvy, and the ever-present threat of piracy dogging their every mile. But Da Gama was undeterred. He had made it to India and back, and that was a triumph in itself. In the end, Vasco da Gama's first voyage was a mixed bag of success and folly. His navigational triumph was undeniable, but his diplomatic skills left much to be desired. Yet despite the setbacks, the journey laid the groundwork for what would become a lucrative and transformative era of trade between Europe and Asia. The spice trade would soon spice up everything from politics to economics, and Da Gama would return to Portugal as a hero, albeit one with a few bruises to his ego. So, while Vasco da Gama may not have won any awards for charm or cultural sensitivity, his voyage did open the doors for future explorers and traders. He blazed a trail across the ocean that others would follow, forever changing the course of history. And as for the spices, well, they would go on to shape the destiny of empires and ensure that Vasco da Gama's name would echo through the ages, a testament to the relentless pursuit of a better-tasting stew. And so, with the ink barely dry on his less-than-diplomatic trade agreements, Vasco da Gama found himself in the thick of a cultural whirlwind in Calicut. The year was 1498, and the Portuguese had just crash-landed into a vibrant melting pot where commerce was king, and everybody seemed to know the game except him. Imagine a bustling marketplace where traders from as far as the Arabian Peninsula and China rubbed elbows over sacks of pepper and piles of precious gems. This was no sleepy seaside village. It was the Wall Street of spices. Now, let's talk first impressions, and Da Gama's were about as smooth as a porcupine's back. You see, the Portuguese had arrived with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. Armed with woolen cloth, hats, and coral beads, they were ready to woo the Zamorin of Calicut, the local ruler who had seen luxury goods from all corners of the known world. Da Gama's gifts were the medieval equivalent of showing up to a royal banquet with a bag of discount Halloween candy. The Zamorin was, understandably, less than impressed. But before we throw Da Gama under the bus completely, let's take a step back and look at the broader picture. The Portuguese were entering a well-established trade network where the rules were set long before they arrived. The Indian Ocean was a bustling hub, a free market on steroids, and Da Gama was the rookie trying to play with the pros. The local merchants were seasoned negotiators who could haggle rings around a novice like Vasco. And let's not forget, these were traders who had been dealing in silks, spices, and jewels for generations. Da Gama, meanwhile, was a fish out of water, floundering in a sea of cultural expectations he didn't understand. He was there to secure a foothold in the spice trade, but he might as well have been trying to sell sand in the Sahara. The Zamorin, seeing through Vasco's offerings, allowed him to trade, but with terms that were about as favorable as a loan from a loan shark. Yet Da Gama had no choice but to accept. He was in too deep, and the prospect of returning to Portugal empty-handed was not an option. The economic clash was palpable. The Portuguese, with their eyes on the prize, saw spices as a direct route to unimaginable wealth. In Europe, the demand was insatiable. Spices not only tantalized the taste buds, but also preserved food and played a role in medieval medicine. Back home, they were worth their weight in gold, literally. Pepper, for instance, could fetch prices that would make a modern-day stockbroker's head spin. The Venetians and Ottomans had controlled this market for years, and Da Gama was determined to change that. But the Indians had a different perspective. To them, spices were a way of life, not just a lucrative export. The markets of Calicut were bustling with activity, merchants haggling, goods changing hands, deals being struck with the kind of fervor that would put a Wall Street trading floor to shame. The Portuguese, in their quest for spices, were just another player in this vast economic tapestry. Cultural differences only added to the complexity. The Portuguese were staunchly Christian, driven by a zealous desire to spread their faith, a mission that seemed to clash with the more diverse and tolerant religious tapestry of India. Here, Hindus, Muslims, and people of various faiths coexisted, their lives intertwined in the daily hustle of trade and commerce. Da Gama's insistence on making religious overtures was met with polite indifference, if not outright confusion. The Zamorin, while tolerant, was primarily interested in trade, not theology. And then there was the language barrier, a comedy of errors in its own right. With limited translators and even fewer cultural references in common, misunderstandings were inevitable. Imagine trying to negotiate a complex trade deal through a game of charades. Da Gama's frustrations were mounting, and the locals were likely bemused by these Europeans who seemed to speak a foreign language and a foreign economic dialect. Yet, amid the cultural and economic friction, there was a mutual fascination. The Portuguese were captivated by the vibrant colors, the exotic spices, and the opulence they encountered. For their part, the Indians were curious about these strangers from across the seas, their ships, and the tales of distant lands they brought with them. It was an encounter that was equal parts bewildering and intriguing for both sides. As Da Gama navigated this labyrinth of cultural missteps and economic negotiations, it became clear that his diplomatic playbook was in dire need of an update. His attempts to secure a favorable trade deal were like trying to win a poker game without understanding the rules. The Zamorin, no fool, played his cards wisely, allowing trade but keeping the upper hand firmly in his grasp. In the end, Da Gama managed to load his ships with a modest cargo of spices, enough to save face back in Portugal, but not enough to declare victory. The spoils of his voyage were more a testament to his perseverance than to any diplomatic skill. But as he set sail for home, he carried with him more than just spices. He had stories of a land rich in culture and commerce, a place where the economic stakes were high and the cultural exchanges even higher. So, as we leave Vasco da Gama's first voyage hanging in the balance, it's worth pondering the legacy of this cultural and economic collision. It was a clash that would reverberate through history, setting the stage for future interactions, both harmonious and contentious. And while Da Gama may not have returned with the wealth he had hoped for, he had opened a door to a world that would captivate the European imagination for centuries to come. Stay tuned as the saga continues, with more twists, turns, and of course, a healthy dash of spice. As Vasco da Gama and his crew set sail from the shores of India, their ships were laden with spices, stories, and a fair share of regrets. The journey back to Portugal was about to put their mettle to the test, and believe me, it wasn't all smooth seas and sunshine. If the outbound voyage was a lesson in ambition, the return trip would be a crash course in survival. The Indian Ocean, once again, proved it wasn't just a backdrop for their epic quest, but a dynamic character with a flair for drama. Picture this: the monsoon winds, those capricious gusts that could either be your best friend or your worst enemy, decided to show their less pleasant side. Within weeks, the fleet was battling storms that transformed the ocean into a turbulent cauldron of chaos. Imagine trying to navigate through that with nothing more than a piece of wood and hopeful stares at the stars. Speaking of hope, let's talk about scurvy, the sailor's nemesis. As supplies dwindled, this notorious vitamin C deficiency began its insidious march through the crew. Gums swelled, teeth loosened, and spirits sank faster than a lead anchor. Medicine of the day was about as effective as a band-aid on a shark bite. The crew, once fired up with dreams of riches, now found themselves grumbling about the less-than-glamorous realities of maritime exploration. What was once an adventure now felt like a prolonged sentence on a floating prison. As if that wasn't enough, the journey was punctuated by squabbles and dissent. Cramped quarters and endless days at sea have a way of fraying even the sturdiest nerves. The sailors, just as human as you or I, began questioning Da Gama's leadership. Sure, he got them to India and back, but the cost was high, and the return on investment Let's just say it wasn't exactly what they'd been promised. The allure of spices had given way to the reality of survival, and the grumblings grew louder with each passing day. Finally, after a harrowing passage around the Cape of Good Hope, a misnomer if ever there was one, they limped into the harbour of Lisbon in July 1499. The return journey had taken over a year, and not without its casualties. Of the original 170 men who set out, only 55 made it back. Those who survived were greeted as heroes, albeit weary ones, with their tales of adventure and hardship spreading like wildfire through the streets. Now, you might think that Gama would be welcomed with open arms, a parade, and perhaps the medieval equivalent of a ticker-tape celebration. Not quite. The reception was mixed, to say the least. While King Manuel was undoubtedly pleased with the potential new trade route, the modest cargo of spices Gama brought back was hardly the treasure trove expected. The economic impact was significant, but not immediate. It was like planting a seed that would take years to bear fruit. Here's where the myth-making machine started to kick into gear. The reality of the voyage, storms, starvation, and scurvy, was quickly glossed over in favor of a narrative that painted Gama as a gallant explorer, a trailblazer who had opened the gates of India to Europe. The gritty, grimy truth of the journey was swept under the rug, replaced by tales of daring and discovery. Heroic explorer or desperate survivor. History, it seems, preferred the former. Back in Portugal, the economic implications of Gama's voyage began to unfold. The spice trade, once the domain of the Venetians and Ottomans, was about to get a Portuguese makeover. By securing a sea route to India, Portugal could now bypass the overland routes and middlemen, bringing spices directly to European markets. The potential for profit was astronomical, and King Manuel was poised to capitalize on it. The voyage may not have been a jackpot, but it was the start of a lucrative new chapter. Yet, despite the economic promise, the reality for Gama's men was stark. Many were left to reckon with their experiences, nursing wounds both physical and psychological. The human cost of exploration was high, a fact often overshadowed by the glittering promise of wealth. As for Gama, he was rewarded with titles and lands, his status elevated to that of a noble hero. The grumbling sailors, whose toil and sacrifice had made the voyage possible, were largely left to fade into obscurity. As the legend of Vasco da Gama took shape, the gritty details of the journey were conveniently airbrushed out. History, after all, has a way of favoring the bold strokes of myth over the fine lines of reality. What remained was a story that inspired future generations of explorers, even as it obscured the harsh truths of the maritime world. The romantic image of the fearless navigator was born, leaving the grim realities of seafaring life to languish in the shadows. In the grand tapestry of exploration, Gama's journey was a pivotal thread, weaving together the ambitions of a nation with the harsh realities of the high seas. The economic and political landscapes of Europe and Asia were on the brink of transformation, and Gama's voyage was the catalyst. Yet, for all the triumphs and tribulations, the legacy of his journey is a testament to the dual nature of exploration, where myth and reality dance in a delicate, often unbalanced, waltz. As we prepare to delve deeper into the aftermath of Gama's voyage and its ripple effects across continents, it's worth pondering the duality of exploration itself. The quest for knowledge and wealth, the relentless pursuit of new horizons, these are the forces that have shaped history, often at great human cost. In the case of Vasco da Gama, the myth of the valiant explorer endures, even as the gritty realities linger just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. Stay tuned as the saga of exploration continues to unfold, with its tales of triumph, tragedy, and the ever-present allure of the unknown. Fast forward a few years, and Vasco da Gama was back on the high seas, this time with a little more clout and a fleet that would make his first expedition look like a dinghy race. In 1502, Portugal, hungry for more spice and less diplomatic drama, decided to send Gama on a second voyage to India. This time, they weren't playing nice. Picture Gama as the returning heavyweight champion, but instead of a trophy, he was gunning for control of the spice trade. The fleet consisted of 20 ships, armed to the teeth and ready to flex some maritime muscle. Gama had learned a thing or two from his first trip. His patience for local politics had worn thin, and his approach was now less "let's trade" and more "let's take over." The Portuguese crown gave him carte blanche to establish a firm grip on the Indian Ocean trade routes, and Vasco was intent on delivering. This wasn't just about spices anymore, it was about dominance. Portugal wanted a monopoly, and da Gama was the enforcer. The journey back to India was smoother this time, thanks to better navigation, and let's face it, sheer numbers. Once there, da Gama made it clear he wasn't interested in playing the part of the polite guest. He bombarded Calicut, exacting revenge for previous slights, and sending a not-so-subtle message: cooperate or face the consequences. Da Gama's tactics were brutal, and his legacy got a bit tarnished by the whole attacking civilian ships thing. But as far as the Portuguese crown was concerned, he was a hero, ruthless but effective. By 1524, Vasco da Gama was appointed Viceroy of India, a title that sounds noble, but came with the complexities of managing trade, politics, and the occasional rebellion. And like any high-stakes job, it was both a reward and a burden. The title meant that da Gama had made it to the top of the maritime food chain, but it also meant he was now responsible for navigating not just the seas, but the treacherous waters of colonial administration. The spice trade was booming, and Portugal was reaping the benefits. Spices flooded into Europe, their prices dropping slightly, but remaining lucrative enough to fill the royal coffers. Da Gama's voyages had cracked open the door to Asia, setting the stage for a century of Portuguese exploration and exploitation. The economic impact was tremendous, with Lisbon transforming into a bustling hub of global trade. But the human cost of this expansion was steep, with native populations often bearing the brunt of European greed. Da Gama's later years were marked by both triumph and tragedy. As viceroy, he worked to establish Portuguese authority, but he was also embroiled in the messy business of colonial administration, a far cry from the romantic image of the lone explorer. His health deteriorated, and in December 1524, he died in Cochin, leaving behind a legacy as complex as the waters he navigated. Now, let's separate the facts from the fiction in the Vasco da Gama saga. The romanticized version paints him as a daring explorer, a trailblazer who opened the east to the west. And while there's truth in that, it's only part of the story. Da Gama was a product of his time, driven by ambition, national interest, and a fair bit of ruthlessness. His expeditions weren't just about discovery, they were about conquest, control, and profit. The myth of the noble explorer overlooks the harsher realities of colonization. Da Gama's voyages set the precedent for European domination in Asia, marking the beginning of a colonial era that would change the world, often at the expense of indigenous cultures and economies. The spice trade, once a symbol of wealth and exoticism, became a tool of imperial power, with Portugal leading the charge. In the end, Vasco da Gama's legacy is a mixed bag. He was a master navigator, but his methods were often brutal. His journeys expanded the geographical and economic horizons of Europe, but they also paved the way for centuries of colonial exploitation. The man who brought spices to Europe also brought with him the seeds of empire, a legacy that would resonate for generations. So, as we wrap up the tale of Vasco da Gama, let's remember him for what he truly was: a complex figure navigating the turbulent seas of ambition and consequence. His voyages reshaped the world, leaving a legacy that's a testament to both human ingenuity and the darker side of exploration. As you drift off to sleep, ponder this. History is a tapestry of stories, woven with threads of triumph and tragedy, and Vasco da Gama's thread is as vibrant and tangled as any. In the highlands of South America, where modern-day Peru now sits, the Incas did what all great empires do. They built roads. But these weren't just any roads. Picture this. No, scratch that. Just think about the vast, sprawling network they created. It was called the Quhapac Nyan, a name that's a mouthful but translates to something like the Great Inca Road. This network stretched over 25,000 miles, rivaling the Roman roads in sheer scale and ambition. Yet, unlike the Roman roads that are famous enough to have their own fan clubs, the Inca roads are more like the unsung heroes of ancient infrastructure. Let's dive into the why and how of this. The Incas were faced with the Andes, a mountain range that looked like it was designed by an architect with a grudge. Imagine trying to convince your average construction crew to lay down some pavement here. The Incas, however, weren't deterred. They saw the Andes not as an obstacle, but as a challenge. And challenges, well, those are the breeding grounds for innovation. Now, the Quijapac Nian wasn't just about moving armies or showing off engineering prowess. Sure, it did that, but it was also the backbone of Inca society, a lifeline that connected the empire's far-flung corners. From the deserts of the coast to the Amazon rainforest, these roads were the veins through which the Incan lifeblood flowed. And by lifeblood, I mean everything from goods to news to llamas carrying who knows what. The roads were designed with an almost obsessive attention to detail. Take the Chasqui, the running messengers of the empire. These guys were the original marathon runners, capable of covering around 150 miles a day. Their secret, a relay system that put today's postal service to shame. The roads facilitated this by providing way stations every few miles. It's like the Incas invented the first express delivery service, minus the tracking numbers. And here's where we start busting some myths. There's this romantic notion that the roads were exclusive highways for the elite or military, a sort of ancient VIP lane. But the truth, everyone used these roads. Farmers, traders, and everyday folks relied on them just as much as the nobles did. They were the Inca Empire's version of a public transit system, open to all and sundry. But let's talk scale for a second. The Incas managed to connect an empire that spread over 770,000 square miles. That's like trying to link up the entire state of Alaska with nothing but muscle power and ingenuity. The roads traversed through some of the most challenging terrains known to man. We're talking about paths hugging cliffs, zigzagging through valleys, and even climbing to dizzying altitudes of over 60,000 feet. And they did it all without the wheel. Yep, you heard that right. There were no carts or chariots rolling down these paths. The Incas relied on llamas and human porters to move goods. Talk about putting your gym membership to use. The roads weren't just practical, though. They were also a symbol of power. When you can stroll from one end of your empire to the other without getting lost or eaten by a mountain lion, it sends a pretty clear message about who's in charge. Plus, it made administration a breeze. Well, as much of a breeze as anything can be when you're overseeing millions of subjects. Let's not forget the engineering feats. The Incas didn't have iron tools or draft animals, yet they built suspension bridges and carved steps into stone cliffs like they were playing a game of Minecraft. It was engineering by sheer willpower and a deep understanding of their environment. Even had a system for drainage that would make a modern civil engineer proud. But all this grandeur wasn't just for show. The economic implications were massive. The roads facilitated trade on a scale that was unprecedented for the region. Goods like textiles, pottery, and foodstuffs moved with surprising efficiency. This trade network helped maintain the empire's wealth and stability, making the Inca Empire a force to be reckoned with. Now, let's not get too starry-eyed. The reality wasn't all smooth roads and seamless transactions. The Incas were a conquering empire, and their roads were as much a tool of control as they were a conduit for culture and commerce. Conquered peoples were often forced to contribute labor to maintain this infrastructure, a system called mida that was mandatory and not exactly what you'd call a voluntary community service. So, as we peel back the layers of the Quijapac Nian, it becomes clear that these roads were more than just stone and dirt. They were the arteries of an empire, sustaining life and imposing order in equal measure. The Incas might not have had the same global PR as the Romans, but their achievements in road building were nothing short of monumental. And as we continue to explore this network, we'll see how it wasn't just the highways of the elite, but the thoroughfares of an entire civilization, pulsing with the daily rhythms of Incan life. So, we've established that the Inca roads were the empire's lifeline, connecting its vast territories and making them hum with all the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Or, as well as you can hum without oil or machines. But how did they keep things moving without the wheel, that staple of civilization since the ancient Sumerians? Enter the Llama, the Incas' secret weapon in their logistics arsenal. These furry, four-legged beasts were the original all-terrain vehicles, capable of navigating the dizzying heights of the Andes with the kind of ease that would put any modern SUV to shame. Llamas were the Inca Empire's answer to FedEx. They could carry up to 70 pounds of cargo each, which may not sound like much until you consider the terrain. We're talking steep mountain paths where one wrong step could send you tumbling into oblivion. In this context, their sure-footedness and stamina made them indispensable. With a herd of llamas, an Incan trader could move goods like textiles, pottery, and precious metals across hundreds of miles. And they did it all without needing a single drop of gasoline, or for that matter, a paved road. It's a bit like running a logistics company with nothing but bicycles and mules. But hey, it worked. Now, let's talk about the wheel, or more precisely, the absence of it. The Incas are often noted for their lack of wheeled transport, a fact that tends to baffle the modern mind. But here's the thing. In the Andes, the wheel was about as useful as a chocolate teapot. The rugged landscape meant that wheeled vehicles were more trouble than they were worth. Instead, the Incas invested in what they really needed, an extensive network of roads built for feet and hooves, not wheels. It's a classic case of form following function, and it worked brilliantly for them. The logistics of feeding an empire without supermarkets or shopping malls is a story in itself. The Incas mastered the art of agriculture in some of the most challenging environments on the planet. Their secret weapon, the potato. Yes, the humble spud, which they cultivated in hundreds of varieties. These weren't just your average grocery store potatoes either. We're talking about tubers engineered to thrive in the harsh conditions of the Andean highlands. The potato was to the Incas what rice was to the Chinese, an essential staple that underpinned their entire economy. But how did they keep everyone fed? The Incan system of storage and distribution was nothing short of genius. They built massive storehouses, or calcas, strategically located along the road network. These were filled with surpluses of food stored for lean times or when armies needed provisioning. Imagine a series of Costco warehouses dotted across the empire, minus the membership fees and long checkout lines. This system ensured that no part of the empire went hungry, even when crops failed or during times of war. Trade was equally sophisticated. The Incas didn't have a currency in the way we understand it, but they had a well-organized system of barter. Goods like textiles, coca leaves, and chicha, a fermented corn drink, were exchanged along these routes, creating a vibrant economy. Textiles, in particular, were a big deal. Inca weavers were renowned for their skills, producing intricate fabrics that were as much a status symbol as they were a commodity. In a world without Instagram, a finely woven tunic was how you showed you had arrived. This barter system was facilitated by the mida system, which we've touched on before. It was essentially a labor tax, requiring subjects to work on state projects, including road maintenance and agricultural endeavors. In return, the state provided the goods and services needed to sustain the population. It wasn't utopia, but it was a system that kept the empire ticking along. Let's not romanticize things too much, though. The Incas were an empire built on conquest and control, and their economic systems were designed to benefit the state more than the individual. The mida system, while efficient, was also exploitative, demanding labor from conquered peoples who had little choice in the matter. The roads and trade routes were as much about extracting resources as they were about connecting people. It's the dual nature of empire, both a marvel of organization and a machine of domination. The Incas didn't just move goods, though. They moved people, ideas, and culture. The roads were conduits for more than just trade. They were the arteries of an empire that pulsed with life. Along these routes traveled not just the goods of everyday commerce, but also the stories, songs, and beliefs that knit the empire together. This cultural exchange was as vital as any economic transaction, maintaining the cohesion of a diverse empire spanning multiple ethnic groups and languages. As we delve deeper into the logistical magic of the Incan economy, it's clear that they didn't just survive. In one of the most challenging environments on Earth, they thrived. Turned the Andes from a barrier into a living, breathing part of their empire, using the natural landscape to their advantage. The roads were more than just paths. They were the lifelines that sustained an empire. And while the Incas might not have had the wheel, they had something far more valuable, a deep understanding of their environment and the ingenuity to make it work for them. So, while the roads and llamas might not get the same press as the wheel or the Roman aqueducts, they were no less impressive. They were the unsung heroes of the Incan economy, working tirelessly to keep the empire fed, connected, and thriving. And as we continue our journey through the history of the Incas, we'll see how these logistical marvels were just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Stay tuned, because the story of the Incas is far from over, and there's plenty more intrigue, innovation, and empire building to come. In the grand tapestry of history, the Incas pulled off a coup that would make any empire builder envious. They unified a diverse collection of cultures and landscapes into a cohesive whole, all while perched on the treacherous slopes of the Andes. But how did they manage this feat without a Twitter account or even a printing press? Enter the socio-political wizardry of the Quihuapac Nian, the Inca road system, and the Chasqui, those indefatigable runners who were the original messengers of the gods. Think of the Chasqui as the FedEx guys of the Andes, but with more stamina and less reliance on technology. These runners were the backbone of the Incan communication network, a human relay system that would give even the fastest fiber-optic networks of today a run for their money. The Chasqui could relay messages at speeds that would make the Pony Express look like a leisurely Sunday ride. Each runner covered a distance of roughly 5 kilometers before passing the message to the next in line. In this way, a message could travel up to 200 kilometers in a single day. That's like getting a letter from Washington, D.C. to New York City overnight without needing a single postage stamp. But what were these messages that required such speed and precision? They were the lifeblood of the empire's administration, ranging from military orders to news of the latest harvest. The Chasqui carried quippers, knotted cords used for record-keeping and communication, that encoded everything from census data to the number of llamas available for the latest trade mission. And while the quipu system might look like a child's craft project to the untrained eye, it was a sophisticated tool for data management. The Incas were essentially Excel wizards, centuries before spreadsheets became the bane of office workers everywhere. Of course, the romantic image of the Chasqui sprinting across the rugged Andean terrain does gloss over some of the grittier realities. These runners were not volunteers out for a scenic jog. They were selected from the ranks of the Inca's subjects, trained from a young age to endure the physical demands of their role. And let's not pretend this was all done in the spirit of camaraderie and adventure. The Chasqui were part of a system designed for control and efficiency, ensuring that the Sapa Inca, the emperor, could exercise his will over an empire that sprawled like a massive jigsaw puzzle across the mountains. Speaking of control, the Quihuapac Nian was the ultimate tool for political unification. This wasn't just a network of roads, it was the empire's nervous system. It allowed the Incas to project their power across vast distances, keeping far-flung provinces in line and ensuring that the diverse cultures within the empire sang from the same hymn sheet. The roads linked key administrative centers where the Inca bureaucracy worked its magic, or, depending on your perspective, its tyranny. These centers were like the regional offices of a multinational corporation, each tasked with managing local affairs while adhering to the edicts from the top. But here's where we bust a few myths. There's a tendency to romanticize the Inca Empire as a harmonious blend of cultures, a utopia where everyone worked together for the common good. The truth, as always, is a bit more complicated. The Incas were masters of diplomacy and integration, yes, but they were also conquerors who knew how to wield a stick as deftly as a carrot. The road system helped them enforce a policy of resettlement, moving entire communities from one region to another to prevent rebellion and encourage loyalty. It was a strategy that might be described as divide and rule, but with a distinctly Incan twist. The Incas also knew the value of symbolism. The roads were not just functional, they were a statement of imperial might. Walking these paths, you couldn't help but be reminded of who held the reins of power. It's the same principle as building a skyscraper with your name on it, except in this case, the name was inscribed in stone pathways that snaked through mountains and valleys. This combination of hard and soft power, the ability to integrate cultures while maintaining control, was key to the Incan success story. And yet, it's worth noting that the Incan Empire was relatively short-lived, lasting less than a century as a cohesive political entity. The roads, though, have endured as a testament to their vision and ambition. They remain a reminder that while empires may rise and fall, the infrastructure they create can leave a lasting mark on the landscape and the people who inhabit it. So, as we marvel at the ingenuity of the Incan road system and the tireless Chasqui, let's not forget the human stories woven into this grand narrative. These roads were more than just paths. They were the means by which an empire held itself together, a blend of collaboration and coercion that shaped the lives of millions. As we continue to explore the legacy of the Incas, we'll see how their roads and runners were just one piece of a complex puzzle, a testament to their ability to harness the power of both nature and human ingenuity. There's more to uncover, so stick around as we delve deeper into the fascinating world of the Incas, an empire that managed to thrive in the most unlikely of places. All right, so we've spent a good chunk of time marveling at the Incan roads and the chasqui, those relay runners who made the Andes look like a suburban jogging path. But let's pivot to the myths and misunderstandings about these trade routes, because, oh boy, the Spanish conquistadors really dropped the ball on this one. If there were a historical version of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, the conquistadors would be the folks who blow their lifeline on the first question. When the Spanish stumbled upon the Incan Empire in the early 16th century, they were like kids in a candy store, but kids who didn't quite know what candy was. They took one look at the elaborate road systems and naturally assumed they were military highways. To be fair, these guys were fresh off their own European campaigns, where roads were built with the express purpose of marching armies around. So, it's understandable they saw everything through a "let's invade" lens. But here's the kicker. These roads were not just for military maneuvers. They were the Amazon Prime of their day, facilitating the movement of goods and information with a speed that left the Spanish scratching their heads. The Spaniards, in their infinite wisdom, also assumed the roads were built to showcase Incan opulence, a sort of grand tour for the emperor. And while the roads did indeed highlight the empire's engineering prowess, the reality was more about practicality than pageantry. These were trade routes, pure and simple, designed to keep the empire's economy humming. They connected highland potato farms to coastal fishing villages, weaving together a complex tapestry of trade that kept bellies full and spirits high. And let's not forget the myth about the roads being exclusively for the elite. Picture a red carpet rolled out across the Andean peaks, reserved for the Incan 1% and their entourage. In reality, these roads were more like the New York subway, overcrowded, chaotic, but essential. Farmers, traders, messengers, and yes, even the occasional llama parade all shared these paths. The roads were the great equalizer, leveling social hierarchies as effectively as they leveled mountain paths. Now, let's talk about the Spanish interpretations, or rather, misinterpretations, of the quippers. These knotted cords were the Incas' version of a data cloud, storing information from census counts to tax records. But to the conquistadors, they looked like the output of a hyperactive toddler's arts and crafts session. They couldn't quite wrap their heads around the idea that these strings held the keys to the empire's administration. It's like trying to understand a novel by staring at the spine. The conquistadors' confusion was compounded by their own biases. They viewed the Incan Empire as a land of wealth ripe for the picking, rather than a complex society with its own systems of governance and trade. They missed the nuance and ended up painting the Incas as either noble savages or ruthless tyrants, depending on the day's mood. These broad strokes ignored the intricate economic networks that sustained the empire. Now, let's dive into some primary sources. The chroniclers of the Spanish conquest, like the ever-quotable Pedro Cieza de Leon, documented the roads with a mix of awe and bewilderment. Cieza de Leon described pathways so well-maintained that not even a single stone was out of place. And yet, he couldn't quite grasp their full significance beyond their immediate utility. It's like admiring a smartphone for its ability to play music while ignoring the fact that it can also send messages halfway around the world. The Spanish chroniclers were captivated by the surface, but missed the depth. Archaeological evidence tells us that these roads were meticulously planned and executed. We're talking about retaining walls, staircases, and drainage systems that would make any modern civil engineer nod in begrudging respect. But more than just engineering marvels, these roads were cultural arteries. They facilitated not just trade in goods, but also the flow of ideas, religious practices, and even political strategies. The roads were an ever-evolving network, adapting to the needs of an empire that, at its height, stretched across much of western South America. And here's where the myth-busting gets juicy. The Spanish couldn't fathom why the Incas had no money, no coins, no currency. They missed the barter economy entirely, failing to see that the Incas had created a system of reciprocal exchange that was sophisticated in its simplicity. Goods were traded for other goods, and services for services, with the state keeping the whole operation balanced through the Middle labor system. It was an economy that thrived on mutual obligation rather than cash flow. But back to those roads. They weren't just about moving goods and people. They were about moving empire. The roads were the empire's nervous system, sending signals that kept the whole body politic functioning. Without them, the Incan Empire would have been a collection of isolated communities, each fighting for its own survival instead of contributing to a greater whole. It was a marvel of logistics and administration that would make even the most seasoned bureaucrats' hearts skip a beat. The Spanish missed this nuance, mistaking the roads for relics of a bygone era rather than a living, breathing part of Incan society. They saw the roads as a means to an end, mostly to facilitate their own conquest. But for the Incas, these paths were lifelines. They were a testament to human ingenuity, a reminder of what can be achieved when a society is built on cooperation and shared purpose. In dissecting these myths, it's crucial to understand why they persist. Myths are born from the allure of the exotic, the desire to see the past as a tableau of noble savages and lost empires. They offer a romanticized version of history that glosses over the complexities and the nitty-gritty realities. But as we dig deeper, we find that the truth is often more fascinating than any fiction. The Incan roads were not just about connecting points at a B. They were about connecting people, cultures, and ideas in a way that was both revolutionary and remarkably effective. So, as we reevaluate these trade routes and the stories we've spun around them, let's keep our eyes on both the romance and the reality. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that the truth is often more interesting and certainly more surprising than the myths we create. And hang tight, there's more to unravel about the Incas, their roads, and the empire that rose and fell on their back. So, as we reevaluate these trade routes and the stories we've spun around them, let's keep our eyes on both the romance and the reality. Because if history teaches us anything, it's that the truth is often more interesting and certainly more surprising than the myths we create. And hang tight, there's more to unravel about the Incas, their roads, and the empire that rose and fell on their back. Fast forward to the present day, and these ancient roads are still making waves. The Llama is no dusty relic. It's been recognized as an UNESCO World Heritage Site, and for good reason. This network wasn't just a historic marvel, it's a blueprint for modern infrastructure in South America. In countries like Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, the Llama's influence is undeniable. Many contemporary roads trace the paths laid down by the Incas, proving that great design never goes out of style. It's like the LBD, little black dress, of road construction, timeless, functional, and always in vogue. But what makes these roads so special that they've endured for centuries? It's all about the Incas' uncanny knack for reading the land. They didn't bulldoze their way through the Andes. They worked with the terrain, not against it. Ingenious switchbacks, natural drainage, and strategic use of local materials made these roads resilient to the elements. And let's face it, if you can withstand the Andean climate, you can pretty much handle anything. The Incas were essentially the original eco-engineers, long before sustainability became a buzzword. Today, engineers and planners look to the Llama as a model of sustainable infrastructure. It's not just about laying down asphalt and calling it a day. It's about creating pathways that respect the environment, preserve cultural heritage, and serve the people who use them. Modern projects in the Andes often echo these ancient principles, proving that sometimes the best way forward is to look back. It's like finding out your grandma's cookie recipe is actually the best one out there. You don't mess with the classics, but the legacy of the Llama isn't confined to roads alone. It's woven into the cultural fabric of the region. Festivals, music, and even local dialects carry echoes of the Incan era. The roads are more than just physical pathways. They're conduits of cultural continuity. They remind us that the past is never as far behind as it seems. In a world obsessed with the next big thing, the Llama is a gentle nudge to remember where we came from. It's a bit like those viral challenges where people try to recreate their old childhood photos, always endearing, sometimes awkward, but undeniably heartwarming. Now, let's pivot to the broader implications of these roads. The Incan network tells us a lot about human resilience and adaptability. The Incas didn't have the luxury of modern technology, yet they built an empire that thrived in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. Their roads were a testament to what humans can achieve when faced with adversity. It's a story of grit, determination, and a fair amount of llama power. And let's not forget, they did it all without a Google Maps to guide them. In a sense, the Q-Hapak Nyan is more than just an engineering feat. It's a narrative of survival and adaptation. The roads reflect a society that understood the importance of connectivity, something we're still grappling with today. In an era of digital highways and virtual connections, the Incan roads remind us that true innovation often comes from understanding the fundamentals. The Incas didn't need Wi-Fi to stay connected. They had the Q-Hapak Nyan. And here's a fun twist. These roads are also a symbol of empire. Not just the Incan Empire, but the empire of human perseverance. The roads have seen the rise and fall of civilizations, yet they remain quiet witnesses to the passage of time. They teach us that while empires may crumble, the legacies they leave behind can endure, shaping the future in ways the original builders could never have imagined. The Q-Hapak Nyan's legacy is also a reminder of the dual nature of progress. On one hand, it represents human ingenuity at its finest, a network that connected people and facilitated trade, culture, and communication. On the other, it's a relic of an empire that thrived on conquest and control. It's a poignant reflection of history's complexity, where achievements and atrocities often walk hand in hand. The roads were both a tool of unification and a chain of subjugation, a duality that speaks to the human condition itself. As we wrap up this journey through the Incan trade routes, it's worth pondering what these roads say about us today. They're a call to embrace complexity, to understand that progress and preservation aren't mutually exclusive. They urge us to build bridges, both literal and metaphorical, between cultures, ideas, and eras. The Incas knew that a road was more than just a means to an end. It was a lifeline, a promise of connection in an ever-changing world. So here we stand, on the shoulders of ancient giants, looking back at a civilization that achieved the extraordinary with little more than muscle and imagination. The Q-Hapak Nyan is not just a path through the Andes, it's a pathway through time, showing us that history is not just a series of events, but a collection of stories that continue to shape our world. As we forge our own paths, let's take a leaf out of the Inca's book. Respect the land, cherish the connections, and never underestimate the power of a well-built road. In the cradle of the Mediterranean, where the sun seems to have a permanent residence, the Minoans were hanging out on Crete around 3000 to 1400 BCE. Think of them as the ancient world's version of a chilled-out island retreat. But let's not get too carried away with palm tree vibes. These folks were busy building a civilization that was as sophisticated as it was sun-kissed. At the heart of it all was the Palace of Knossos, which, despite its name, was less of a traditional palace and more like a labyrinthine social hub that would put modern shopping malls to shame. Knossos was no ordinary pile of stones. Picture an architectural jigsaw puzzle with a splash of ancient flair. Covering about 150,000 square feet, it was a sprawling complex that seemed to thumb its nose at the very idea of simplicity. It had everything from ceremonial rooms and storage areas to workshops and living quarters. And if you think the only thing ancient architects worried about was stacking stones, think again. The Minoans had a plumbing system that medieval Europe could only dream of. We're talking about a time when flushing toilets were a thing of the future, except on Crete, where they were already part of the everyday routine. The Minoans were the ancient innovators of waist-high waterworks, managing to channel water not just into their homes, but out of them too. This was the stuff of legends, or at least the stuff that made medieval Europeans look like they were still living in the Stone Age. Now, onto the walls, or rather, the lack thereof. While most ancient civilizations were busy building massive defensive structures to keep out the neighbors, the Minoans had a different approach. Why bother with walls when you could have a navy? Their seafaring prowess was the stuff of ancient gossip columns. Instead of towering bastions, they relied on their maritime skills to keep their islands safe. It was like the Minoan version of why have a front door when you can just lock up the sea. Their navy acted as both a defense mechanism and a trade facilitator, ensuring that Crete was a bustling hub of commerce and culture. And let's not forget the cultural achievements that made the Minoans the cool kids on the ancient block. Their art was vibrant and dynamic, featuring everything from frescoes of dolphins to acrobatic bull leapers. The Minoans had a knack for capturing movement and life in their art, a reflection of their lively society. They weren't just painting pretty pictures, though. These images were a testament to their connection with nature and the world around them. While the rest of the ancient world was still figuring out the stick figure, the Minoans were busy decorating their walls with scenes that could have doubled as Instagram feeds for ancient influencers. The Minoans also had a rather democratic approach to architecture. Unlike the top-down, king-in-a-castle blueprint of many other ancient societies, Knossos and other Minoan sites seemed to be built for the people. The palace was a communal space, more like a bustling city centre than a secluded royal residence. This communal approach extended to their trade networks. The Minoans were master traders, their ships darting across the Mediterranean like ancient FedEx, carrying goods and culture from Egypt to the Levant. They were the original globalists, long before the term was a buzzword in political debates. So, what set the Minoans apart from their contemporaries? Perhaps it was their remarkable ability to balance innovation with tradition, trade with security, and art with practicality. They didn't just build a society, they sculpted a culture that was as fluid as the seas they sailed. While the Minoans might not have left behind grand declarations in stone like the Egyptians, or built walls you can spot from space like the Chinese, their legacy is no less impressive. Their achievements remind us that sometimes the most profound legacies are those that embrace change, innovation, and a touch of Mediterranean chill. In the grand tapestry of history, the Minoans were the master weavers of trade threads across the Mediterranean. Their economy was less about the bling and more about the bling-bling of commerce. If you think the Silk Road was the only ancient trade route deserving of a map, buckle up, because the Minoans were the maritime maestros long before the age of exploration made it cool. They were the nautical networkers, with ships gliding from Crete to as far-flung ports as the Levant, Egypt, and even possibly Spain, peddling the ancient world's version of luxury goods. Imagine a time when getting your hands on the latest Cretan pottery was akin to snagging the newest iPhone on launch day. The Minoans exported their signature ceramics, intricately designed and perfectly crafted, like the Louis Vuitton bags of the Bronze Age. These vessels weren't just for sipping wine. They were status symbols, found in archaeological sites stretching from the Nile Delta to the shores of Turkey. But pottery was just the tip of the trade iceberg. They also dealt in saffron, a spice so precious it was practically the Bitcoin of its time, along with oil, wine, and the occasional bolt of fine textile. And let's not forget the Minoan knack for importing. They were the original collectors of Egyptian papyrus and Levantine timber, trading their goods for the best the Mediterranean had to offer. This wasn't just trade. It was a cultural exchange on a grand scale, the kind of networking that would make LinkedIn look like a high school yearbook. The Minoans were the middlemen of the Mediterranean, connecting disparate cultures through the universal language of commerce. Now, let's talk logistics. If you think Amazon Prime's 2-day shipping is impressive, the Minoans were running an ancient equivalent with shipping routes as smooth as their olive oil. Their ships, sleek and fast, were the cargo vans of the open seas. They could move goods faster than a roomer at a royal court, navigating the tricky waters of the Aegean like seasoned pros. But how did they keep track of all this hustle and bustle? Enter Lineare, the Minoan script that's still giving linguists a headache. While it's yet to be fully deciphered, what we do know is that Lineare was less about Homeric epics and more about keeping the books balanced. Think of it as an ancient Excel spreadsheet, with columns of symbols representing goods, taxes, and inventories. Forget the romantic notion of ancient scripts as mere conveyors of grand tales. For the Minoans, it was all about the bottom line. In a world where most civilizations were busy chiseling their legacies into stone, the Minoans were busy etching theirs into clay tablets and pottery shards. Their focus was on the here and now, on ensuring the daily flow of goods and resources that kept their society humming. They had the foresight to understand that a well-oiled economy was the backbone of any flourishing civilization. The Minoans also had a rather democratic approach to their economic exchanges. Unlike the cutthroat mercantilism of later empires, Their trade networks were more about mutual benefit than domination. This wasn't colonialism, it was collaboration, a fact that enabled them to establish long-lasting trade links with their neighbors. It's as if they signed a non-aggression pact with the rest of the Mediterranean, opting for economic alliances over military conquests. So why does this matter? Because the Minoan model of trade reveals a civilization that prioritized connectivity and cooperation over conflict. They prove that you don't need to build an empire to make a mark on history. Instead, the Minoans show us that sometimes the biggest impact comes not from the sword, but from the olive branch and the goods it carries. Their legacy is a testament to the fact that economic prowess can be as mighty as any military campaign. As we sail through the annals of history, the Minoans remind us that success is often about adaptability and innovation. They weren't just trading goods, they were trading ideas, art, and culture, creating a vibrant tapestry that wove together the disparate threads of the ancient world. While the likes of Homer and Herodotus might have overlooked them in their epic narratives, Minoans left behind a legacy that speaks to the power of trade as a force for cultural exchange and economic prosperity. And just like any good story, this is where we leave the Minoans for now, bustling about their business, ships laden with goods, and their influence spreading far and wide. The seas may have hidden their secrets, but the legacy of the Minoans endures, a reminder that in the game of history, the quiet traders sometimes have the loudest voices. Stay tuned, because the next chapter in the Minoan saga promises to unravel even more mysteries from the depths of time. So, what exactly do we see when we peer into the colorful world of Minoan art and religion? It's like stepping into an ancient Instagram feed, vibrant and dynamic, where the likes of frescoes and bull leaping take center stage. Now, let's dive into the heart of this visual spectacle. First on the agenda is the ubiquitous Minoan fresco. Imagine walking through the halls of Knossos, where the walls aren't just walls, they're massive canvases alive with color. Dolphins frolic above your head, graceful and blue like an ancient ocean safari, while acrobats leap over bulls in scenes that might make your modern-day adrenaline junkie feel like a couch potato. Minoan artists had a flair for capturing movement, a kind of Bronze Age motion picture, if you will, long before celluloid was even a glimmer in history's eye. These frescoes weren't just decoration. They were a reflection of the Minoans' zest for life and their deep connection to the natural world around them. Speaking of bull leaping, let's pause here. Picture this. You, a brave soul, are sprinting towards a charging bull, aiming to grab its horns and vault over its back. It's like combining gymnastics with a dash of rodeo, minus the cowboy hats, and with a lot more risk. While today's extreme sports are often backed by Red Bull and a hefty insurance policy, Minoan bull leapers had neither. Yet this was more than just a thrill. Bull leaping was a ritual, a dance with danger that showed reverence to the bull, an animal deeply embedded in Minoan culture. But why the bull, you ask? Enter the world of Minoan religion, where the gods were less about thunderbolts and more about nurturing the earth. If the Greeks had Zeus and his penchant for theatrics, the Minoans leaned towards a gentler pantheon. Their deities were often associated with nature, fertility, and the cycles of life. The great mother goddess, for instance, was central to their religious life. She was a symbol of fertility and nature's bounty, a far cry from the sometimes capricious deities of Olympus. The Minoans seemed more interested in celebrating life and the earth than in appeasing a grumpy sky god. Now, let's untangle the thread of myth from reality. One of the most enduring legends tied to the Minoans is that of the Minotaur, a creature that's half man, half bull, and wholly fascinating. According to Greek mythology, the Minotaur was kept in a labyrinth under the palace of Knossos, a beast that roamed its twisting corridors until Theseus came along to play hero. But here's the twist. Archaeologists have yet to find any evidence of a labyrinthine dungeon beneath Knossos. Instead, the palace itself, with its maze-like layout, might have given birth to the myth. It's as if the Greeks took one look at the complex corridors of Knossos and thought, you know what this place needs? A monster. In reality, the Minotaur myth might reflect the Minoans' symbolic use of the bull in their rituals, particularly in bull-leaping ceremonies. The Greeks, ever the storytellers, could have woven these practices into a tale that satisfied their love for epic narratives and monstrous foes. It's a classic case of history being co-opted by legend, where the facts are less thrilling than the fiction. Still, the story of the Minotaur endures, a testament to the power of myth to capture the imagination long after the truth has faded into the archaeological dust. So, why does all this matter? Because understanding Minoan art and religion gives us a window into their worldview. These were people who celebrated life with all its vibrancy and danger, who found divinity not in distant heavens, but in the earth beneath their feet. Their legacy reminds us that sometimes the most profound stories are painted not in stone, but in color and myth, capturing the essence of a civilization that was as lively as it was mysterious. As we leave the Minoans for now, with their frescoes and their fearless leaps, we're left with a sense of a people who danced to their own rhythm, in tune with the natural world and unafraid of its challenges. Their art and religion were not just reflections of their society, but were integral to it, creating a tapestry that was as vibrant as the frescoes they left behind. There's more to uncover in the next chapter of our Minoan saga, where we'll explore how their culture continued to influence the ancient world long after their civilization had faded. Stay tuned to see how these ancient Cretans left their mark on history, art, and legend alike. As we dive into the heart of Minoan society, the scene unfolds like a vibrant ancient tapestry, full of intricate patterns that defy simple categorization. It's time to explore the social fabric of the Minoans, a society that seemingly put many of their contemporaries to shame with its progressive vibes. If you think ancient civilizations were all about men with crowns bossing everyone around, the Minoans might just surprise you. Instead of kings brandishing scepters, we have hints of a community that embraced more collective leadership, a sort of ancient board of directors, if you will. Let's start with the Minoan women, who were clearly not just sitting around waiting for the men to bring home the bacon, or in this case, the olive oil. These ladies were out and about, weaving their influence into every corner of Minoan life. Evidence suggests that women held powerful roles in both the religious and economic spheres. These weren't your run-of-the-mill priestesses either. They were the real deal, leading ceremonies and possibly even holding sway over the palatial affairs. Think of them as the ancient world's version of power brokers, wielding influence without needing a crown or a throne. Now, before we get carried away with the notion of a Minoan matriarchy, let's pump the brakes on that fantasy. While women certainly had more agency than in many other ancient cultures, it wasn't all sunshine and saffron. The reality was likely a complex balance of power, with women and men sharing responsibilities in a way that was rather enlightened for the time. It's a tantalizing glimpse of a society where gender roles were a bit more flexible, though not entirely without boundaries. As for the political structure, the Minoans seem to have taken the king out of kingdom. There's surprisingly little evidence of a centralized monarchy, a stark contrast to the pharaohs ruling over in Egypt or the kings of Mesopotamia. Instead, the Minoans might have operated under a form of collective governance. It's as if they looked at the concept of absolute power and collectively shrugged. The idea of a council or assembly making decisions is far more plausible, possibly with leaders from different regions coming together to govern the island's affairs. This decentralized approach might have contributed to the societal harmony that the Minoans are often credited with. Instead of one person calling the shots and everyone else falling in line, it seems there was room for more voices at the table. It's a bit like ancient democracy, minus the ballots, and with more frescoes. This collective leadership style could explain the lack of fortifications and defensive structures on Crete. Why build walls when you can build consensus? Of course, the Minoans weren't all peace pipes and pottery wheels. Their trade networks and naval prowess meant they weren't entirely defenseless. They just preferred to keep the peace through diplomacy and commerce. It's like they discovered the secret to a stable society. Keep everyone busy trading and making art, and there's less time for war. But we'd be remiss not to mention that this same lack of fortifications might have made them vulnerable, especially when the going got tough. And speaking of tough times, let's talk about the mysterious decline of the Minoans. Scholars have long debated what led to their downfall around 1450 BCE. Unlike the fall of Rome, there are no grand tales of barbarians at the gates. Instead, it seems more like a slow unraveling, a decline that whispers rather than roars. Some suggest natural disasters, like the catastrophic eruption of the Thera volcano, played a role, sending tsunamis and ash clouds that disrupted their way of life. Others point to invasions by Mycenaeans, mainland Greeks who might have seen an opportunity in Minoan vulnerability. But here's the kicker. There's no smoking gun. The Minoans didn't leave behind a diary detailing their demise, so were left piecing together clues from pottery shards and ruined palaces. It's a bit like trying to solve a mystery with half the pages torn out. What we do know is that their decline wasn't marked by the usual hallmarks of ancient collapse. No mass graves or burned cities. Instead, it seems the Minoans faded into the annals of history, their influence absorbed by the rising powers of the Mycenaeans. This peaceful decline, if we can call it that, speaks volumes about the Minoans' societal makeup. Perhaps their collaborative approach to governance meant there was less internal strife, making them more prone to a gradual decline rather than a spectacular collapse. It's a reminder that even the most vibrant cultures can dim quietly, leaving behind echoes that resonate through time. In the end, the Minoans leave us with more questions than answers. They were a society that thrived on the edge of the known world, balancing trade, art, and diplomacy with remarkable finesse. Their legacy is one of innovation and adaptability, a testament to the power of a society that valued collective strength over individual might. As we ponder their enigmatic end, we're reminded that sometimes the most remarkable stories are those left untold, etched not in stone, but in the sands of time. Stay tuned, because the final chapter of our Minoan journey promises to delve even deeper into the mysteries they left behind. As we wrap up our deep dive into the Minoan world, it's time to tackle the grand finale, the mystery of their decline. Imagine a civilization that slips quietly into history, leaving behind echoes instead of fireworks. Around 1450 BCE, the Minoans began to fade, and the reasons are as murky as the depths of the Aegean Sea. Some blame the Thera eruption, a volcanic event so colossal it could have given Mount Vesuvius a run for its money. When Thera blew its top, modern-day Santorini. By the way, it wasn't just a local disaster. Imagine ash clouds so vast they'd make today's air traffic controllers cringe, and tsunamis crashing into Cretan shores like ancient tidal waves of doom. This was Mother Nature at her most dramatic, and the Minoans were caught in her crosshairs. But hold your horses, or your bull leapers in this case, because natural disaster isn't the whole story. Enter the Mycenaeans, the mainland Greeks who were like the rugged, no-nonsense cousins of the Minoans. They saw a weakened Crete, and like any opportunistic neighbor, they moved in faster than you can say olive oil trade. The Mycenaeans weren't just into pottery and pretty frescoes. They were all about power and expansion. So while Mother Nature was busy hurling ash and waves, the Mycenaeans might have been plotting a peaceful or not-so-peaceful takeover. Then there's the economic angle. Picture this. A Bronze Age economic crisis that would make modern recessions look like minor blips. The Minoans' trade networks were the envy of the ancient world. But what happens when the demand for your saffron and ceramics dries up? The Minoan economy, heavily reliant on trade, could have taken a nosedive, sinking faster than a poorly built trireme. It's a stark reminder that even the most robust systems can falter when the market shifts or resources dwindle. So, what's the takeaway from this ancient mystery? It's a cocktail of natural calamity, opportunistic neighbors, and economic woes. The Minoans didn't leave behind a dramatic scene of destruction. Instead, they slipped into obscurity, their influence absorbed by the likes of the Mycenaeans. But their legacy didn't vanish. It morphed and melded into the cultural tapestry of the ancient Greeks, who took the best Minoan ideas and ran with them like relay racers of civilization. As we ponder the Minoans' legacy, it's clear they were the unsung heroes, or perhaps the unsung influencers, of the ancient world. Their art, architecture, and trade networks didn't just vanish, they evolved. Greek culture owes a debt to the Minoans, from the labyrinthine designs of their palaces to the vibrant frescoes that inspired later Greek art. The Minoans were the original blend masters, mixing trade, art, and innovation into a civilization that set the stage for European culture. Now, let's hit the fast-forward button to today. What can modern societies learn from the Minoans? For starters, their innovative spirit is a lesson in adaptability. In a world obsessed with building walls, the Minoans remind us that sometimes the best defense is a good dialogue, or in their case, a well-stocked navy. In a time when digital networks are the new trade routes, the Minoans' emphasis on connectivity and cooperation is more relevant than ever. They were the original networkers, proving that a well-connected society can thrive without resorting to conflict. And let's not forget their sea-loving lifestyle. In an age of climate change and rising seas, the Minoans might have a thing or two to teach us about living with the ocean rather than against it. They embraced the sea as a source of wealth and security, a highway of opportunity rather than a barrier to be feared. Perhaps it's time we took a leaf out of their scrolls and learned to harmonize with our environment instead of waging war against it. It's easy to romanticize the Minoans as idyllic islanders with a penchant for art and trade, but their story is a complex tapestry of triumphs and challenges. They remind us that civilizations thrive not on isolation, but on the strength of their connections, be they economic, artistic, or diplomatic. The Minoan legacy is a testament to the power of cultural exchange and innovation, a reminder that even the quietest voices can leave the loudest echoes in history. As we close the book on the Minoans, we're left with a sense of wonder at a civilization that danced on the edge of history, leaving behind a legacy that still captivates our imagination. Their story is a blend of myth and reality, a reminder that sometimes the most enduring legacies are those that embrace change and innovation, rather than clinging to the past. So here's to the Minoans, the original Mediterranean maestros, whose innovations still ripple through time like waves across the ancient seas. In the ancient lands of what we now call Iraq, there wasn't much room for casual strolls through the park. Instead, you had the Tigris and Euphrates rivers playing a game of let's flood unpredictably with the Mesopotamian plains. It was a place of fertile chaos, where Mother Nature seemed to be throwing a perpetual temper tantrum. Yet somehow, this tempestuous geography became the cradle of civilization around 3500 BCE. The early settlers were like the ultimate survivalists, but instead of crafting trendy Instagram posts about their off-grid lifestyle, they were busy inventing writing, law, and the wheel. Talk about multitasking. Mesopotamia, land between the rivers, wasn't just a catchy name. It was the reality for those living there. The rivers were lifelines and potential death traps, depending on their mood, which shifted like a teenager's taste in music. The annual floods could transform the landscape into a mud-splattered mess, but when the waters receded, they left behind a layer of rich silt. It was a perfect setup for agriculture, minus the occasional drowning. This blend of fertile land and moody weather gave rise to the first cities, like Uruk and where people realized that working together was slightly more productive than clubbing each other over the head. Now, let's talk about the early kings who ruled over this unpredictable Eden. These guys weren't just sitting on thrones, sipping wine, and throwing lavish parties. They were more like the CEOs of ancient startups, constantly innovating to keep their city-states from sinking into irrelevance or mud. Sargon of Akkad, one of the OGs of empire building around 2334 BCE, was like the Steve Jobs of his time, minus the turtleneck. He united the city-states into the Akkadian Empire, proving that a good PR campaign and a strong army could turn a patchwork of settlements into a sprawling powerhouse. This was also the era when the first hints of the Assyrian warrior ethos began to emerge. The Assyrians, who would later become the rock stars of military might, started out in humble beginnings, more garage band than headline act. Their initial domain was Ashur, a city-state named after their chief god, which sounds like a slick branding move if you ask me. It was nestled in the northern reaches of Mesopotamia, a strategic location that allowed them to trade with Anatolia and the Levant while keeping an eye on their southern neighbors. Early Assyrian society was a cocktail of farmers, traders, and warriors, shaken and stirred by the need to survive and thrive in a competitive neighborhood. Their warrior ethos was less about brute force at this point and more about strategic alliances and economic savvy. They weren't yet the unstoppable force they'd later become, but they were laying the groundwork, figuring out the best ways to flex their muscles without pulling a hamstring. So, what was it that eventually turned these Mesopotamian underdogs into overachieving conquerors? Part of it was necessity. Being sandwiched between larger powers like the Babylonians and the Hittites meant that the Assyrians had to develop a knack for defense and diplomacy. They were like the Switzerland of the ancient world, minus the neutrality and chocolate. Instead, they honed their skills in the art of war, learning to wield their chariots and composite bows with deadly precision. But the real turning point came with the kings who saw the potential for greatness beyond their borders. These were the guys who looked at their modest patch of land and thought, why stop here? They realized that the key to power lay in unifying the city-states under a single banner, much like Sargon had done centuries earlier. Only this time, the Assyrians added their own twist to the recipe, a relentless focus on military innovation and psychological warfare. Of course, the Assyrians also knew how to woo their subjects with infrastructure projects that would make any modern city planner envious. They built roads, aqueducts, and temples, not just for the glory of the gods, but to showcase their own power and ingenuity. It was a clever move. After all, nothing says we're here to stay like a shiny new ziggurat towering over the landscape. As they expanded their reach, the Assyrians began to see themselves not just as conquerors, but as the rightful rulers of the known world. It was a bold claim, but one they backed up with a formidable army and a bureaucracy that could rival any corporate giant. They perfected the art of ruling through fear and awe, using their reputation for brutality to keep potential rebels in line. It wasn't just about taking territory, it was about keeping it, and that required a delicate balance of carrot and stick. So here we are, at the dawn of the Assyrian Empire, with the seeds of greatness just beginning to sprout. The stage was set for a saga of conquest and innovation, driven by a warrior ethos that would leave an indelible mark on history. But before they could dominate the ancient world, the Assyrians had to master the art of survival in a land where the rivers could either be your best friend or your worst enemy. And that, dear listener, is where our tale truly begins. As the Assyrians stood on the cusp of empire, it was clear that their journey from scrappy city-state to ancient superpower required more than just brute force and chariot racing. Enter the political chess game of the early Assyrian city-states, a saga of cunning moves, strategic alliances, and backstabbing that would make Game of Thrones look like child's play. Picture a world where diplomacy was often as sharp as a sword, and alliances were about as stable as a house of cards in a hurricane. At the heart of this intrigue was Shamshi-Adad I, a king with ambition so big it could barely fit within the city walls of Ashur. Rising to power around 1808 BCE, Shamshi-Adad wasn't just content to rule his own patch of dirt. No, he was the type of guy who looked at a map and saw opportunity in every unclaimed piece of land. His vision was to create a kingdom that stretched across northern Mesopotamia, and he wasn't afraid to play dirty to achieve it. Shamshi-Adad's strategy was a masterclass in ancient politics. First, he secured his power base in Ashur, ensuring that any dissenters would think twice before crossing him. Then, like a general on a chessboard, he moved swiftly to capture key cities like Ekalatum and Mari. His tactics were as varied as they were ruthless. Sometimes he conquered outright. Other times, he manipulated local rulers into becoming vassals. It's like he was playing a game of Risk, but with real lives on the line. One of the most cunning moves in Shamshi-Adad's playbook was the use of family. He placed his sons in strategic positions of power, much like a modern CEO appointing relatives to the board of directors. His son Ishmdagan was installed as the ruler of Ekalatum, while another son, Yasma-Adad, took control of Mari. It was a family affair, with Shamshi-Adad pulling the strings from his throne in Ashur, ensuring that his legacy was cemented across the region. But here's the kicker. Shamshi-Adad's empire wasn't built on brute force alone. He understood the importance of infrastructure and commerce, investing in roads and trade routes that would make any logistics manager proud. By connecting the dots between his cities, he ensured that goods flowed smoothly, filling the coffers and keeping the wheels of his empire turning. This economic savvy was crucial, as it allowed him to fund his military campaigns and keep his soldiers well-equipped and loyal. Of course, not everyone was thrilled with Shamshi-Adad's expanding empire. The political landscape of Mesopotamia was a patchwork quilt of rivalries and alliances, and there were plenty of city-states eager to knock him down a peg. Enter the city of Babylon, ruled by the ambitious Hammurabi, who would later become famous for his law code. Hammurabi was watching Shamshi-Adad's expansion with the interest of a wolf eyeing a lamb, waiting for the right moment to pounce. While Hammurabi plotted his next move, Shamshi-Adad was busy innovating on the military front. The Assyrians were honing their skills in siege warfare, developing tactics that would become the stuff of legend. They perfected the art of building siege ramps and deploying battering rams, turning city walls into mere obstacles rather than impenetrable fortresses. It was a game changer, allowing them to breach defenses that had previously seemed invincible. But let's not romanticize the brutality of siege warfare. The reality was grim: cities razed, populations enslaved, and a trail of destruction left in the Assyrians' wake. Yet, for all their might, the Assyrians knew that ruling through fear alone was a recipe for rebellion. They needed to balance their military prowess with a touch of diplomacy, a carrot to complement their very big stick. As Shamshi-Adad expanded his influence, he also embraced the art of psychological warfare. His armies marched under banners that struck fear into the hearts of their enemies, and his reputation for ruthlessness preceded him like a dark cloud. It was a strategy that would become a hallmark of the Assyrian Empire: domination through dread, but tempered with enough benevolence to keep the conquered from rising up too soon. Despite his successes, Shamshi-Adad's reign wasn't all smooth sailing. His son's incompetence in marriage became a thorn in his side, with Yasma-Adad more interested in the finer things in life than in ruling effectively. It was a classic case of nepotism gone wrong, and it created cracks in the empire that enemies were all too eager to exploit. As Shamshi-Adad's empire began to show signs of strain, the political chess game of Mesopotamia continued to play out. Alliances shifted, betrayals abounded, and the balance of power teetered on a knife's edge. It was a world where the only constant was change, and where the fall of a king could be as swift as his rise. Shamshi-Adad's death around 1776 BCE marked the beginning of the end for his empire, as his sons struggled to maintain the territories he had painstakingly acquired. The vultures were circling, with neighboring powers eager to carve up the spoils. Yet, even in the face of dissolution, the legacy of Shamshi-Adad's reign would endure, setting the stage for the Assyrians' future as masters of the ancient world. As the dust settled on Shamshi-Adad's fallen empire, the seeds of future greatness were quietly taking root. The Assyrians had learned valuable lessons in strategy and statecraft, lessons that would serve them well in the centuries to come. The Game of Thrones was far from over, and the Assyrians were just getting started. This was the dawn of an era where kings would rise and fall, alliances would be made and broken, and the Assyrian Empire would emerge from the shadows to become a force to be reckoned with. But that's a story for another day, as the wheels of history continue to turn, and the stage is set for the next act in the epic saga of the Assyrian Empire. With the fall of Shamshi-Adad's empire still echoing across the Mesopotamian plains, the Assyrians found themselves back in the Game of Thrones, sharpening their strategies for a future where they would claim the spotlight. Enter the heavyweights, Tiglath-Pileser III and Sargon II, whose names alone could strike fear into the hearts of their contemporaries. These guys weren't just playing the game, they were rewriting the rulebook. Let's kick things off with Tiglath-Pileser III, who took the throne in 745 BCE and decided that being a king wasn't enough. His ambition, to turn the Assyrian Empire into the undisputed heavyweight champion of the ancient world. Under his rule, the empire expanded rapidly, swallowing territories faster than you can say Mesopotamian buffet. He was the brains behind the creation of the first fully professional standing army, a move that made the Assyrian military the ancient equivalent of a well-oiled machine. This standing army wasn't just a bunch of guys with swords and spears. It was a diversified force that included infantry, cavalry, and charioteers, each trained to perfection. Tiglath-Pileser III didn't just want soldiers. He wanted specialists who could execute complex maneuvers like a choreographed dance of death. And this wasn't your run-of-the-mill conscription, either. The Assyrian army was a career path, offering steady pay and a chance to climb the ranks. Imagine the ancient version of LinkedIn, with endorsements in skilled swordsman and expert charioteer. Tiglath-Pileser's military innovations didn't stop there. He introduced the concept of deportation as a tool of empire building, forcibly relocating conquered peoples to prevent rebellion and to spread Assyrian culture. It was a brutal strategy, but effective, creating a melting pot of cultures that enriched the empire while keeping discontented populations too scattered to organize an uprising. It was a cold calculus, the kind that makes you shiver when you realize that beneath the veneer of imperial glory, lay a foundation built on the suffering of countless displaced families. Despite these harsh realities, there's no denying the allure of Tiglath-Pileser's achievements. He turned a patchwork of territories into a cohesive empire, one that stretched from the Mediterranean coast to the mountains of Iran. By the time of his death in 727 BCE, the Assyrian Empire was a colossus, a testament to the power of military innovation and administrative genius. But the empire didn't rest on Tiglath-Pileser's laurels for long. Enter Sargon Roman II, who assumed power in 722 BCE and picked up right where his predecessor left off. Sargon Roman II wasn't content with maintaining the status quo. He wanted to elevate the empire to new heights. His reign saw the conquest of Sumeria, the obliteration of the kingdom of Israel, and the subjugation of the Babylonians. Sargon was a man on a mission, armed with a relentless determination that would make even the most ambitious CEO blush. Sargon's strategy was a masterclass in psychological warfare. He understood that the reputation of invincibility was as powerful a weapon as any spear or chariot. His armies were not just conquerors, but propagandists, spreading tales of Assyrian might that could quell rebellion before it even began. Yet, for all the myth-making, Sargon knew the limits of fear. He was a pragmatist, leveraging diplomacy and strategic marriages to secure his gains, because nothing says peace treaty like a royal wedding. The myth of Assyrian invincibility, however, was just that, a myth. Beneath the polished facade of imperial power, the reality was messier. Ruling such a vast territory was like juggling flaming swords. One misstep, and everything could come crashing down. Rebellions were an ever-present threat, and maintaining the empire required constant vigilance and an iron grip on far-flung provinces. It was a high-stakes game where the cost of failure was often paid in blood. Economically, the Assyrian Empire was a juggernaut, its coffers filled with the spoils of conquest and the tribute of subjugated peoples. The Assyrians were shrewd administrators, implementing a system of taxation that ensured a steady flow of resources to the imperial capital, Nineveh. But this was no welfare state. The wealth was concentrated in the hands of the elite, while the average Assyrian citizen toiled in the fields or served in the army. It was a system that worked as long as the conquests continued, but one that teetered on the brink of collapse should the tide of fortune turn. Sargon Roman II reign wasn't without its challenges. In 710 BCE, he faced a rebellion in Babylon, a city with a penchant for causing headaches for Assyrian kings. Undeterred, Sargon marched his armies south and crushed the uprising with characteristic ruthlessness, adding yet another feather to his cap. However, the victory was bittersweet, a reminder that even the mightiest of empires was never more than a misstep away from chaos. In the end, Sargon Roman II reign ended as it began, with ambition and a touch of hubris. In 705 BCE, he led a campaign against the kingdom of Urartu, a move that would prove fatal. Sargon was killed in battle. His body never recovered, leaving a legacy that was both glorious and cautionary. His death was a stark reminder that even the most formidable of empires could be brought low by the unpredictable tides of war. As the Assyrian Empire continued to expand and evolve, it became increasingly clear that its myth of invincibility was both a strength and a weakness. The empire's reputation as an unstoppable force was a powerful deterrent, but it also created a sense of complacency that could be exploited by cunning adversaries. The Assyrians had built a vast and mighty empire, but maintaining it would require constant adaptation and vigilance. The story of the Assyrians is a tale of ambition, innovation, and the harsh realities of empire building. It's a saga that challenges the romanticized narratives of invincible warriors and benevolent rulers, revealing the human cost of such greatness. As we delve deeper into the history of the Assyrian Empire, we'll continue to explore the complexities and contradictions of this fascinating civilization, a journey that will take us to the very heart of ancient power and its enduring legacy. But for now, let's leave our story open, the next chapter waiting to unfold as the Assyrian Empire stands on the brink of its ultimate test. As the Assyrian Empire stood on the brink of its ultimate test, it wasn't just their military might that kept the wheels of their vast dominion turning. Behind the curtain of conquest was an intricate economic engine fueled by bustling trade routes connecting the empire to distant lands. Picture this: caravans snaking across the desert, laden with goods ranging from Anatolian tin to Phoenician purple dye. Trade wasn't just a side gig for the Assyrians. It was the lifeblood that kept their empire thriving. Let's take a closer look at these ancient trade routes. The Royal Road, stretching over 600 miles, was like the Silk Road's older, equally ambitious sibling. It connected the heart of Assyria to the farthest reaches of the empire, ensuring a steady flow of resources and wealth. This wasn't just a dirt path trodden by the occasional merchant. It was a meticulously maintained artery of commerce. Think of it as the ancient world's version of the interstate highway system, minus the potholes and rest stops. Trade wasn't just about moving goods from point A to point B. It was a complex web of economic and cultural exchange. The Assyrians were savvy traders, bartering everything from textiles to metals, and even the exotic luxuries that kept their elite dripping in opulence. Gold from Egypt, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and ivory from Africa were just a few of the treasures that found their way into Assyrian markets. This bustling trade network wasn't just about material wealth. It was a melting pot of ideas, technologies, and cultures that enriched the empire far beyond its borders. Now, let's address the myth that the Assyrians were a one-trick pony, solely focused on military conquest. Sure, they had an army that could make your knees tremble, but they were also master builders and architects. The Assyrian heartland was dotted with cities that were as much a testament to their cultural sophistication as their military prowess. Nineveh, the jewel in the Assyrian crown, was a city that could rival any in the ancient world. Nineveh wasn't just a city, it was a statement. Its walls stretched a staggering 5 miles, enclosing a metropolis that boasted palaces, temples, and libraries. Under King Ashurbanipal, Nineveh became a center of learning and culture, with a library that housed over 30,000 clay tablets. This was like the ancient equivalent of the Library of Congress, a repository of knowledge ranging from epic poetry to scholarly treatises. Ashurbanipal wasn't just a king, he was a collector of wisdom, ensuring that the legacy of Assyrian culture would endure beyond the battlefield. The architecture of Nineveh was nothing short of awe-inspiring. Picture grand palaces adorned with intricate bas-reliefs depicting the king's victories, mythological creatures, and scenes of daily life. These weren't just decorative flourishes, they were propaganda in stone, reinforcing the power and legitimacy of the Assyrian rulers. The artistry was so detailed that you could almost feel the tension in a lion's muscles or the fear in a captive's eyes. This was art with a purpose, a visual narrative that celebrated and cemented the empire's dominance. Let's debunk another myth while we're at it, the notion that the Assyrians were culturally stagnant, a civilization stuck in a perpetual cycle of conquest. In reality, they were cultural magpies, borrowing and adapting the best ideas from their neighbors. They were polyglots of culture, incorporating elements from the Babylonians, Hittites, and Egyptians into their own unique tapestry. Assyrians were more than just warriors. They were cultural alchemists, transforming the influences of the ancient world into something distinctly their own. But let's not get carried away with romanticizing the grandeur of Assyrian culture without acknowledging the darker side of their economic success. The wealth that flowed into Nineveh wasn't evenly distributed. It was concentrated in the hands of the elite, while the lower classes bore the brunt of the empire's relentless expansion. For every palace built, there were thousands of laborers toiling in the scorching sun, their lives a testament to the harsh realities of empire building. The Assyrian economy was a finely tuned machine, but it was also a precarious balancing act. The constant need for conquest wasn't just about glory. It was about sustaining an economic model that demanded continuous expansion. Tribute from subjugated peoples filled the imperial coffers, funding the lavish lifestyles of the elite and the ever-hungry war machine. It was an economic cycle that worked brilliantly until it didn't. A house of cards built on the backs of conquered peoples and the spoils of war. Yet, for all its complexity and contradiction, the Assyrian Empire's economic and cultural achievements were undeniably impressive. They built an empire that was as much a marketplace as it was a battlefield, a civilization that thrived on the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture. The Assyrians were more than just conquerors. They were creators, innovators, and traders. Their legacy is a reminder that even the most militaristic of empires can be a beacon of cultural and economic achievement. As we stand at this juncture in the Assyrian saga, it's clear that their story is far from over. The empire's cultural and economic tapestry was as rich and intricate as the bas-reliefs that adorned their palaces. Yet, beneath the surface, tensions simmered, and the seeds of future challenges were quietly taking root. The Assyrian Empire was a colossus, but even the mightiest of giants must eventually face the test of time. The next chapter in this epic tale will explore how the Assyrians navigated the challenges of maintaining their vast empire and the unexpected twists that lay ahead. But for now, let's leave the story open, the next act waiting in the wings as the Assyrian Empire stands poised on the edge of history's stage. But even the mightiest giants eventually find themselves teetering on the precipice, and for the Assyrians, the edge was closer than they realized. As we fast forward to 627 BCE, the death of Ashurbanipal, the last great king of the empire, marks the beginning of the end. Empire that once seemed invincible was now a patchwork of internal discord and external threats, showing that even the best-laid plans can go belly-up faster than you can say Nineveh. Let's start with the internal strife. The Assyrian strategy of ruling through fear and might had always been a double-edged sword. The empire was like a pressure cooker, simmering with discontent. Provincial governors, who were more like mini-kings with a taste for power, began squabbling over the spoils. Without a strong leader to keep them in check, these local rulers started acting like rebellious teenagers left home alone for the weekend. This infighting was more than just sibling rivalry. It was a full-blown family feud that weakened the empire from the inside out. Meanwhile, the economy was teetering on the edge, much like a tightrope walker with a fear of heights. The constant wars that had once filled the Assyrian coffers were now draining them dry. The financial burden of maintaining a colossal army and an elaborate bureaucracy was no small change. As the tribute streams started to dry up, the empire's financial underpinnings began to look shakier than a house of cards in a windstorm. Externally, the Assyrians faced enemies who had been sharpening their swords and biding their time. Enter the Medes and the Babylonians, two powers that were more than happy to team up for a little payback. The Medes, led by King Cyaxares, were like that neighbor who throws a rager at the slightest provocation. They had the manpower and the motivation, and they weren't about to let this opportunity slip through their fingers. Meanwhile, Nabopolassar of Babylon was itching to reclaim his city's former glory, and what better way than to take down the bully on the block? By 612 BCE, the coalition of the Medes and Babylonians had had enough of Assyrian shenanigans. They launched a full-scale attack on Nineveh, the heart of the empire. The siege was brutal, the kind of thing that would make even the most seasoned war correspondent blanch. After months of relentless assault, Nineveh fell, a collapse that echoed across the ancient world. It was a fall from grace that made Icarus's plummet look like a gentle glide. With Nineveh in ruins, the Assyrian Empire crumbled like a stale cookie. The once mighty power was reduced to fractured territories, each scrambling to survive in a rapidly changing landscape. The Assyrian heartland, once a symbol of imperial might, was now a mosaic of ruins, a stark testament to the ephemeral nature of power. So, what can we learn from the rise and fall of the Assyrian Empire? First, let's dispel the notion of Assyrian invincibility. Sure, they were military innovators and architectural geniuses, but they were also masters of overextension. Their empire was built on a foundation of fear, but fear is a fickle friend, loyal when convenient, but ready to abandon ship at the first sign of trouble. The legacy of the Assyrians is a cocktail of awe and caution. They left behind architectural marvels and cultural treasures, but their story is also a cautionary tale about the limits of power and the dangers of hubris. The Assyrians teach us that empires, like all human endeavors, are subject to the whims of fate and the relentless march of time. And let's not forget the cyclical nature of history, which has a way of repeating itself like a broken record. The Assyrians rose to power through innovation and adaptation, yet fell due to stagnation and complacency. It's a pattern as old as civilization itself, a reminder that even the greatest empires are only as strong as their ability to evolve. In the end, the Assyrian Empire's fall was as instructive as its rise. It's a story that echoes through the ages, a narrative that challenges us to question the romanticized tales of invincible rulers and to acknowledge the human cost of their ambitions. The Assyrians may have left the stage, but their lessons remain, a timeless reminder of the complex dance between power and vulnerability and the ever-present possibility of change. As we bid farewell to the Assyrians, let's carry their story with us, a chronicle of human achievement and folly, a testament to the enduring dance of history. After all, the rise and fall of great powers is a tale as old as time, one that continues to unfold in the chronicles of our world today. Your toes curl against the cold, hard-packed earth of the Nordic morning, a biting chill that makes even the bravest Viking shiver. But there's no time for complaining, not when you're a shipbuilder with a long day ahead. The sun's barely peeking over the horizon, more like a shy toddler than a blazing Viking warrior. But you're up and ready to tackle the day. Or at least, you're pretending to be. First things first. Breakfast. Forget your modern cereal and milk. You're looking at a hearty bowl of barley porridge, maybe sweetened with a drizzle of honey if you're lucky. On the side, there's some dried fish. Protein is a shipbuilder's best friend after all. While you're chewing through that, let's talk tools. Your trusty axe, think of it as the Viking equivalent of a Swiss Army knife, is your constant companion. It's not just for chopping wood. It's a multi-purpose tool that also acts as a hammer, a pry bar, and in a pinch, a weapon. The blacksmith down the road crafted it, and you'd better hope his work was up to snuff. A shardy axe means a shardy ship, and no one wants to be the laughingstock of the fjord. After breakfast, it's straight to the shipyard. Now, don't picture some high-tech facility with conveyor belts and power tools. This is an open area by the water, where the air is filled with the scent of fresh-cut wood and the sound of hammers meeting nails. The ground is mudded from yesterday's rain, not ideal, but when has a Viking ever been deterred by a little dirt? Here, hierarchy is as much a part of the landscape as the towering wooden frames of the half-built ships. At the top, you've got the master shipbuilder, the jarl of the yard, if you will. He's the brains behind the operation, the one who knows where every plank should go and what every nail should do. Beneath him are the journeymen, skilled workers who know their way around a keel. And then there's you, the apprentice, fetching tools and learning the ropes. Or should I say, learning the knots. Speaking of materials, let's get into that. The wood you're working with isn't just any old timber. This is oak, known for its strength and durability, sourced from local forests. But sometimes, the best materials come from afar. Iron nails are imported, often traded for with goods like dried card or wool. This is where the Vikings' reputation as traders comes into play. No helmet horns here, just a keen sense of barter. And while we're busting myths, let's address those helmets. If you're picturing yourself donning a horned helmet as you work, think again. That particular piece of flair is more Wagnerian opera than Viking reality. As you set to work, you notice the social dynamics at play. It's not just about who swings the axe the hardest. It's about who knows the most. The master shipbuilder's decisions are respected because his experience, his years spent learning the art of crafting vessels that can withstand the North Sea, is invaluable. This isn't just any old job. You're building the very ships that will carry warriors to far-off lands, ships that could decide the fate of raids and battles. So, no pressure. The morning passes with the rhythm of axes and saws, the occasional grunt of effort, and the quiet satisfaction of a plank fitting perfectly into place. Every ship is a work of art, but also a feat of engineering. You're not just building something that floats. You're building something that sails, something that survives. And if you do your job right, you'll have a ship that cuts through the water like a knife through porridge, carrying its crew to glory, or at least to their next raid. By now, the sun is a little higher in the sky, and the chill has given way to a more bearable, if still brisk, breeze. You step back for a moment to survey the work. It's a good start, but there's a long way to go. The ship's keel is in place, the backbone of this wooden beast. The keel is like the spine of a dragon, strong and straight, dictating the shape and strength of the whole vessel. It's made from a single piece of oak, painstakingly selected and shaped. The precision required here is no joke. One misstep and the entire ship will suffer for it. As you work, you can't help but feel a sense of pride. This is more than just a job. It's a craft, an art form, a tradition passed down through generations. And though the work is hard and the hours long, there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that what you create will soon be cutting through the waves, carrying your people to new adventures. So, you roll your shoulders, grip your axe a little tighter, and get back to work. There's still a long way to go before the sun sets, and plenty more to learn. The day is just getting started, and so are you. With your axe in hand, and the sun finally casting a friendlier glow over the shipyard, you dive headfirst into the intricate dance of construction. First on the agenda, the hull. Think of it as the skin of the beast, hugging the skeleton of the keel and ribs. Viking longships were known for their clinker-built design, where overlapping planks were riveted together. It's like shingling a roof, but horizontal and decidedly more seaworthy. Each plank, known as a strake, is meticulously cut and bent to fit. The process is a bit like assembling a jigsaw puzzle, except missing a piece here means an unexpected swim in the icy North Sea. Now, we can't talk shipbuilding without mentioning the economic pinch it puts on the community. A longship could set you back up to 16 cattle, a hefty price when you consider that was the equivalent of a small fortune. But don't think of it as splurging on a luxury yacht. This is an investment, one that ensures the crew can plunder richer shores or trade for more exotic goods. After all, what's the point of a Viking raid if you're coming back empty-handed and with nothing to show for your efforts but a few bruises? As you work, the sounds of the shipyard are a symphony of productivity. Hammer strikes echo like a heartbeat, and saws sing their raspy tune. There's a certain rhythm to it, a cadence that keeps everyone in sync. It's not just about brute force, it's about precision and timing. The hull must be watertight, after all. Sealant in the form of tar and animal fat is applied between planks, sort of medieval caulk. Glamorous? Hardly. Effective? Absolutely. But why go to all this trouble? Why not just build a bigger, clunkier tub? The answer lies in the Vikings' secret weapon, speed. These longships could reach up to 15 knots, or about 17 miles per hour, thanks to their sleek design and the power of the Norse wind. They were designed to slip silently into enemy harbors, deliver a quick strike, and then vanish before anyone knew what hit them. It's not just shipbuilding, it's tactical engineering. Now, let's swerve into the logistics lane. The resources needed for building a ship like this are staggering. You're looking at 1,500-2,000 oak trees per ship. That's a serious dent in the local forest, and a testament to the importance of these vessels to the Viking way of life. And then there's the matter of manpower. A single ship could require a team of 30 to 50 craftsmen, each bringing their own expertise to the table, from blacksmiths forging nails to the leather workers crafting oar straps. Ah, the oars. Don't underestimate these simple tools. Sure, sails could catch the wind, but when you needed precision, or the wind was contrary, it was the oarsmen who powered the ship. Rowing was more than just a backup plan. It was a skill, a test of strength and endurance. And let's not forget the social aspect. Sharing an oar meant you were part of a team, a brotherhood of the sea. Plus, it beats the monotony of staring at the same stretch of ocean for hours on end. As the day wears on, you start to appreciate the social dynamics at play in the shipyard. The master shipbuilder isn't just a boss. He's a mentor, passing down knowledge that has been honed over generations. There's a camaraderie here, a shared understanding that this work is bigger than any one person. Each plank, each nail, is a testament to that shared effort. And then there's the myth-busting to keep in mind. Viking ships weren't just vessels of war. They were the SUVs of their time, versatile, reliable, and capable of crossing vast distances. They enabled trade routes that stretched from the icy shores of Greenland to the bustling markets of Constantinople. They were the reason why Viking influence spread across so many miles, why their culture left marks as far away as North America, way before Columbus ever got seasick. But let's not get too romantic. For every tale of glory, there's a harsh reality. Shipbuilding was grueling work, fraught with danger. One slip of the axe, one poorly forged nail, and the consequences could be disastrous. Yet, despite the back-breaking labor and the ever-present threat of an unexpected dip in the frigid water, there's a sense of purpose here. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the shipyard, you take a step back to admire the day's work. The skeletal frame of the longship is beginning to fill out, its shape becoming more defined, more alive. It's a satisfying sight, this wooden leviathan slowly taking form under your hands. But there's still much to be done before it can taste the salt water. You pack up your tools, feeling the weight of the day's labor settling into your bones. There's a certain satisfaction in knowing that today you've contributed to something that will soon carry its crew across uncharted waters. Tomorrow, the work continues, the fitting of the mast, the crafting of the intricately carved figurehead that will strike fear into the hearts of enemies. As you trudge home, you ponder the paradox of it all. The Vikings are often painted as marauding barbarians, And yet, here you are, part of an intricate, sophisticated process that's as much about art as it is about conquest. It's a reminder that history isn't black and white. It's a tapestry of contradictions and complexities, much like the woven sails that will soon catch the wind and carry this ship on its maiden voyage. And with that, you call it a day. The shipyard will be waiting for you in the morning, ready to reveal another layer of its secrets. After all, building a Viking longship is like piecing together the past. Every step forward is a journey into the heart of history itself. As the last echoes of your footsteps fade away into the shipyard's evening hush, you can't help but look forward to tomorrow, especially because it starts with something every Viking values: a hearty meal and a good story. Lunchtime in the shipyard is less about nourishment and more about nourishment of the soul. You see, Vikings have an insatiable appetite for tales, whether they're about guards hurling thunderbolts or the latest gossip about Bjorn's new sheep spoiler. It's just as dramatic. Picture this. The sun is at its zenith, and you and your shipbuilding comrades are gathered around a makeshift table, a warped plank of wood balanced on two sturdy logs. Meals are a communal affair, with everyone contributing a bit to the part. A chunk of bread here, a slab of salted meat there. Someone even managed to snag a few apples, a rare treat in these parts. It's not gourmet dining, but it does the job. You're not just filling your belly, you're also feeding your mind. And speaking of feeding the mind, the main course isn't what's on your plate, but what fills the air around you: stories. The Norse myths are more than just entertainment. They're the moral compass and cultural bedrock for the Vikings. Today, the saga being told is of Thor and his mighty hammer Mjolnir, a tale as old as time and as resonant as a well-struck anvil. It's not just Thor's brawn that captivates, but his cleverness and determination. For a shipbuilder, these are virtues to live by. After all, you need more than just strength to shape a seaworthy vessel. You need the wit to solve problems when the wood doesn't quite fit or the nails refuse to hold. But let's not get too carried away by the allure of the sagas. Sure, the stories paint Vikings as larger-than-life figures, but the reality is often more grounded and sometimes brutal. Take the romanticized notion of Vikings as marauding warriors with no other aspiration than pillage and plunder. Sure, they had their moments of, let's say, aggressive negotiation, but Vikings were also shrewd traders and explorers. They navigated the vast North Atlantic in open boats, reaching the shores of North America 500 years before Columbus even considered setting sail. Talk about being ahead of the curve. In fact, the ships you're working on are not just war machines, but the SUVs of the Viking world. Versatile, reliable, and essential for commerce. They were the backbone of a trade network that stretched from the icy fjords of Norway to the bustling marketplaces of Baghdad. Yes, Baghdad. It's not all swords and shields. There's a fair bit of silk and spices too. In the year 1000, you could find Viking ships laden with everything from furs and amber to wine and wheat, traversing waterways as far-reaching as the Volga and the Danube. That requires a different kind of courage. The courage to face the unknown in search of opportunity. As the tales of Thor and Odin give way to more earthly matters, the conversation shifts to the latest gossip. Did you hear about Eric's new boat? The one with the carved prow that's supposed to ward off sea serpents? And what about the rumors of a new settlement across the sea, where the land is as fertile as a god's imagination? It's a mix of fact and fiction, a blend as heady and intoxicating as the mead occasionally passed around the circle. These stories and rumors aren't just idle chatter. They shape the Vikings' worldview, influencing everything from exploration routes to shipbuilding techniques. After all, if you're setting sail for lands unknown, you better be prepared. That means building ships that can handle the roughest of seas and the longest of voyages. It's not just about getting there. It's about getting there in one piece and with enough cargo to make the trip worthwhile. Yet, it's not all strategic planning and mythological musings. There's a camaraderie that grows from these shared moments, a bond forged through sweat and stories. Laughter punctuates the air, a reminder that despite the hardships, there's joy to be found in community. After all, what's the point of building a ship if you can't enjoy the journey? As lunch winds down, you're left with the lingering sense of connection, not just to your fellow shipbuilders, but to the generations of Vikings who came before. Each story told, each nail hammered, is a link in a chain stretching back through time, binding you to an enduring legacy. The afternoon sun casts a golden hue over the shipyard as you return to your work with renewed vigor. The break has done its job, revitalizing both body and spirit. There's still a lot to do before this ship is seaworthy, but you're up for the challenge. After all, you're not just building a vessel, you're crafting a means of exploration, a tool of trade, a symbol of cultural exchange. As you pick up your axe once more, you can't help but marvel at the complexity of it all. The myths, the trade, the craftsmanship, they're all part of a greater tapestry, one that defies simple categorization. Vikings may be remembered for their raids, but it's their innovation and adaptability that truly define them. They're not just marauders, they're mariners and merchants, pioneers and poets. So, as you swing your axe with precision and purpose, you do so with the knowledge that you're part of something much larger than yourself. The shipyard hums with the rhythm of creation, a testament to the enduring spirit of a people who dared to dream beyond the horizon. And as the day wears on, you find yourself dreaming too, of distant shores, of new possibilities, of stories yet to be told. But don't get too caught up in your daydreams. There's still a lot of work to be done, and tomorrow will bring its own challenges and triumphs. For now, though, you're content to be part of this grand endeavor, one plank, one tale, one day at a time. As you swing your axe with precision and purpose, the afternoon sun spills over the shipyard like a spotlight on your labor of love. The air buzzes with a sense of urgency, like a countdown to a grand reveal. The longship is nearing completion, and it's as if the very wood beneath your hands is itching for the open sea. It's a bit like those movie montages where the hero gears up for the final showdown. Except here, the antagonist is the ever-looming North Sea, ready to swallow anything that isn't crafted with Viking-level diligence. Now, let's talk about these finishing touches. The ship's hull is complete, but it's the details that matter. Every nail, every joint must be perfect. You're not just building a boat, you're creating a lifeline. One weak spot could mean the difference between glory and a very soggy defeat. And let's not forget the decorative elements. Viking ships weren't just tools of war, they were floating works of art. The prow might sport a fierce dragon head, not just for intimidation, but as a nod to the Norse belief in protective spirits. Think of it as the Norse version of a bumper sticker that says, "I break for sea monsters." But why all this fuss over aesthetics? Well, in the Viking world, your ship was a status symbol. It's like rolling up to a medieval car show in a sleek, hand-carved, seafaring convertible. These ships were a testament to wealth and power, a visual declaration that you meant business. And let's face it, who wouldn't want their enemies to see a fearsome dragon slicing through the mist? As you work, the political and social factors driving Viking expansion aren't just background noise. They're the soundtrack to your afternoon. The Vikings were in many ways victims of their own geography. Scandinavia, beautiful as it was, didn't offer much in the way of farmland. If you wanted to thrive, you had to look beyond the fjords to greener pastures, sometimes literally. This drive for exploration was fueled by necessity as much as it was by ambition. Political landscape was a patchwork of chieftains and clans, each vying for resources and influence. The longship was their ticket to new territories and trading partners. It was their escape hatch from political squabbles and limited land. It's like having a one-way ticket out of a traffic jam and into an open highway. And those myths of Viking brutality, let's set the record straight. Sure, the Vikings were known for their raids, but they were also farmers, traders, and settlers. Raiding was just one tool in their economic toolkit, albeit a rather dramatic one. The Carolingian monasteries had wealth, and the Vikings had the mobility to access it. But let's not forget, they also established trade routes that connected distant lands. The image of the horned-helmeted barbarian plundering villages is more Hollywood than historical fact. As the ship takes shape, so too does the understanding of your place in this society. Shipbuilders played a crucial role in the Viking economy, crafting the vessels that would carry not just warriors, but also goods and ideas across the known world. Your work is a vital cog in a much larger machine, one that propels your people toward new horizons. With the final nail hammered into place, it's time for the moment of truth, testing the ship. This isn't a mere formality, it's a ritual, a rite of passage. The ship is slid into the water with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Will it float? Will it glide through the waves as intended? The collective breath of the shipyard hangs in the air, a shared anticipation that feels almost palpable. As the longship kisses the water, the tension breaks. It floats gracefully, barbing slightly as if testing its newfound freedom. And then, propelled by strong oars, it glides away from the shore. It's a moment that feels almost sacred, a testament to human ingenuity and determination. The shipyard erupts in cheers, a chorus of triumph echoing across the water. The successful launch is more than just a technical achievement. It's a symbol of potential. This ship will carry your people to new lands, new opportunities, and yes, new conflicts. It's a microcosm of the Viking spirit, a blend of exploration and enterprise. As you watch the longship carve its path through the waves, you realize that your work has not just shaped wood, but also destiny. And while the world might remember the Vikings for their raids, you know there's more to the story. This ship will trade as often as it battles, forge alliances as much as it conquers. It's a vessel of duality, much like the Vikings themselves, fearsome yet familial, explorers yet economists. As the longship returns to shore, the sun dips lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the shipyard. The day's work is done, but the journey of this ship is just beginning. You pack up your tools, feeling the satisfying ache of a job well done. The shipyard is quieter now, the hum of activity giving way to the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. You leave with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that you've contributed to something larger than yourself. And as you walk home, the path feels less like a routine and more like a prelude to the stories yet to unfold. The Vikings may have been known for their daring raids and fearsome warriors, but you know the real marvel lies in their spirit of exploration and innovation. Tomorrow, there will be more ships to build, more challenges to face, more myths to bust. But for now, you revel in the moment, carrying with you the knowledge that you've played a part in shaping the course of history. It's a reminder that while the seas may be vast and unpredictable, the human spirit is an even greater force to be reckoned with. And so, the story continues, one ship, one voyage, one day at a time. As you leave the shipyard behind, the echoes of today's triumph resonate within you, like the lingering notes of a well-struck lyre. The longship is more than just timber and tar. It's a testament to human ingenuity and the age-old desire to conquer the unknown. You see, the Vikings weren't just about horned helmets and epic battles. They were about pushing boundaries, geographical, technological, and cultural. Their legacy isn't just written in the sagas. It's carved into the very framework of our modern world. Let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer brilliance of Viking shipbuilding. These wooden marvels were the Formula One cars of their day, designed for speed and agility. With a double-ended hull, they could reverse direction without turning around. Imagine trying that with your average family wagon. They could navigate shallow rivers just as easily as open seas, giving the Vikings unparalleled access to territories that were off-limits to their rivals. It's no wonder that these ships carried them as far as North America and the Caspian Sea. Yes, Leif Erikson and his merry band of Norsemen were sipping mead on the shores of what we now call Newfoundland around the year 1000, half a millennium before Columbus even got his sea legs. But let's dig deeper. The real genius of these ships lay in their construction. The use of clinker-built design, where planks overlap like the scales of a serpent, provided not only strength but flexibility, allowing the ships to glide smoothly over waves rather than crashing through them. Talk about thinking outside the box, or in this case, the boat. And then there's the keel, that sturdy backbone forged from a single piece of oak. It's the unsung hero of the ship, providing stability and strength, much like the unsung heroes of the shipyard who laboriously crafted it. Economically, these ships were game changers. They transformed the Vikings from local raiders into international traders, establishing a network that would rival any modern-day supply chain. The cost of a longship, equivalent to the price of 16 cattle, a small fortune at the time, but the return on investment was immense. These vessels enabled the trade of furs, amber, and slaves in exchange for silver, silk, and spices. It was a bustling marketplace on water, a mini Wall Street that sailed the high seas. But here's the kicker. Viking ships didn't just influence trade routes, they shaped cultures. They served as conduits for the exchange of ideas, technology, and even genetics. Wherever these ships landed, they left a mark, sometimes literally, as in the runestones they carved to commemorate their journeys. These stones are like Viking social media posts, permanent status updates etched into rock for future generations to ponder. And what about the romanticized image of the Viking as a ruthless marauder? Sure, they were fierce warriors, but they were also skilled negotiators and savvy businessmen. The historical Viking was as likely to wield a quill as he was an axe, writing contracts and treaties as often as swinging swords. They were pragmatic, adaptable, and above all, opportunistic, traits that are as relevant today as they were in the 9th century. Now, let's bust another myth. Viking society wasn't all about pillage and plunder. It was surprisingly democratic, with a kind of local assembly, where free men could voice their opinions and influence decisions. Women, too, enjoyed a degree of autonomy uncommon in other contemporary societies, with legal rights to inherit property and, in some cases, run businesses. So, next time you think of Vikings, remember they weren't just brawlers. They were also builders of a society that valued community and cooperation. It's fascinating how the echoes of Viking shipbuilding resonate through time, influencing modern naval architecture. The principles of hydrodynamics they intuitively grasped are now studied in engineering schools worldwide. Their legacy is evident in everything from the sleek lines of modern yachts to the modular construction techniques used in today's shipyards. And those clinker-built techniques, they're still used in some Scandinavian boat-building traditions today, a nod to an era when woodworking was as much an art form as a craft. As you wind down your day, reflecting on this legacy, it's clear that Viking shipbuilding was about more than just creating vessels. It was about crafting a means to explore, to trade, and to connect. It was about breaking free from the constraints of geography and tradition to embrace the possibilities of the world beyond. And in doing so, the Vikings left a legacy that endures, a legacy of innovation, exploration, and cultural exchange. So, as you trudge home, the weight of the day's labor lifting with each step, you carry with you a newfound appreciation for the complexity of Viking life. They were not the one-dimensional figures of legend, but a society as nuanced as the ships they built. Their story is one of contradictions and complexities, a reminder that history is never as simple as it seems. The romantic allure of the Viking warrior may capture our imagination, but it's their spirit of ingenuity and exploration that truly defines them. As you lay down to rest, visions of longships cutting through mist-laden waters dance in your mind. You realize that the Vikings' greatest legacy isn't in their conquests, but in their courage to venture into the unknown. It's a mindset that continues to inspire, urging us to look beyond the horizon and dare to discover what lies beyond. And so, the story continues, not just in history books or museum exhibits, but in the very spirit of human exploration and innovation. The world may have changed dramatically since the days of the Vikings, but some things remain the same. The call of the unknown, the drive to push boundaries, and the desire to connect with others, these are as timeless as the sea itself. And as you drift into sleep, the distant crash of waves against ancient shores becomes a lullaby, a reminder that the journey of discovery is never truly over. It's a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity and resilience, qualities that have propelled us through the ages and will continue to guide us into the future. And so, you dream of distant shores and uncharted waters, knowing that, like the Vikings, you are part of a story that is still being written.